Intro. Welcome to Daily Wire Backstage, Biden's Congressional Address. I'm Jeremy Boring, known around these parts by lots of things. We're glad that you've tuned in. Will Biden be able to make it to the end of this speech without taking a nap? If he manages to make it all the way through without a single, come on, man, are we positive that it isn't pure fakery like the moon landing? How many times could Kamala have visited the border between the start and finish of this crap show? The answer is 10 trillion, because that's how much spending Biden has proposed in his first 3 months. It's truly insane. Daily Wire Backstage is sponsored by ExpressVPN. You have the right to privacy. Defend your rights at expressvpn.com/backstage. Joining me to, discuss this crap show and probably a little bit more, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Matt Walsh, Mickey Knowles. As always, we will be taking direct questions from our audience throughout the night. To get access to the chat box where you can submit your questions, go become a Daily Wire member. Visit dailywire.com/subscribe to sign up. Really, this show exists because of the Daily Wire subscribers. We're so grateful to them. We wouldn't be able to produce this show without them. We hope you'll consider becoming one. dailywire.com/subscribe. Fellas, it's our favorite night of the year.
Well, I mean, we were just here last week. So what the hell? Like, that's my first question. What the hell? Also,
Ben has like a quota, and he will not go above the quota of Backstage.
Oh, my goodness. That is certainly true. And we are well above the quota. And also, I hate this. I mean, this is like all the things I hate. Backstage. State of the Union, Knowles. Like it's just the State of the Union is the most monarchic garbage thing that we do in American politics. Yeah. I hate it. It doesn't matter who the president is.
Stop trying to get me to like it, Ben.
It's such garbage. Yeah, monarchy. Apist. But the ridiculousness of the State of the Union address, in which we all pretend that the President of the United States is an elected king, and then he comes in and everybody cheers and they feed him like he's an important person, as opposed to a geriatric daughter that they're wheeling in on a gurney so that he can babble nonsensically for an hour and they can cheer for proposals that won't be passed. It's really maddening. I hate it in general. Tonight we're going to get Joe Biden proposing another $2 trillion in spending. He's also going to, because it's a day, ending in Y.
Yeah, that's right.
And also he is going to be apparently saying that January 6th was worse than any event in American political life since the Civil War, which skips, like the murder of tens of thousands of people by the KKK over several decades, and, the assassinations of at least 4 presidents, and the shooting of another one, and, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, spate of bombings in the 60s, Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there are a few, like he was alive for all of these, so he really should know about them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of astonishing that he's saying that, but that's not a shock. I mean, so I put together my preview of his speech.
Here we go.
Here we go. I've been working on this all day. So it goes like this. My fellow Americans, Shazujim and Stevim, and come on. Woo! Everybody gets up and they scream.
Except the Republicans.
I promise that by the end of my term in office, every black American will have a blueberry and 2 belly buttons. Woo! Like President Harris, who you
He's going to keep going. I heard a preview of this.
To my left and also to my right and all around. She's very woman and also black. Woo! And it's like, this is what it'll be for an hour. So I just saved you an hour. I know, it's over. It's over, guys.
That plus $2 trillion. Done. So why do we keep doing this?
Well, look, this is a great American political tradition when we all gather in late April when the president shows up with like 4 congressmen or something and goes on Zoom to the rest of them. No, it's funny because the monarchical aspect of it, frankly, I think is the best part. It's the pomp and
God, no.
However,
Michael Hamburg over here.
but we don't even get that. We don't. The one aspect of this whole State of the Union thing that everyone tunes in for is the pomp and circumstance and ladies and gentlemen, the president, right? Even if you don't like it, that's what you're watching. But we're not getting that. We're getting a doddering old man who does not know which end is up, reading some lines that have been written for him to a half-empty chamber.
Well, I will say there's one thing I'm excited about, and that is that whenever Joe Biden speaks for more than 37 seconds, it's like watching Nick Wallenda walk over a volcano. Right? Like there's always that possibility. Like Nick Wallenda is real good at walking over volcanoes. But let's be real about this.
Yeah.
You're really watching on the off chance that you will have been watching live when he fails to make it over the volcano.
Right.
And when Joe Biden speaks, I mean, he'll be slurring his words and he'll be messing things up and he'll be talking about why he has to give every child a pony delivered by catapult or some such nonsense. And then he'll just slip into a reverie. And we're all sort of hoping he goes there, right? I mean, let's be real about this. We want like a full dream sequence.
Yeah.
Like a full WandaVision
Yeah.
thing to happen where he's like back in the 1950s doing sitcoms with Dick Van Dyke. Like, that's what I'm rooting for.
Yeah.
But it's scripted. That's the problem. You get that moment from Joe Biden when it's not scripted. I don't know that I've ever watched a State of the Union address or a joint speech to Congress because they're so uninteresting to me. I've pretended that I've watched them. I've even live tweeted them without watching them. So this will be my first experience with this, and so I'm kind of excited about that.
The most fun thing about Joe Biden is watching the press report on him.
Yeah.
Because they have gone to a level of dishonesty that actually is comedy.
Well, normally it's X-rated to see that many people orgasm at once,
but
especially faking it.
But
I mean,
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's the O face. It's not really the orgasm.
I am interested to see. I'm a little interested to see the Republican response from Tim Scott. And what?
Well, you're new to this by your own admission. The worst part of the night is always the response. It doesn't matter who gives it.
That's true. I'm expecting that, but I am also curious if they go all in on police reform, which is the exact wrong thing for the Republicans.
Oh my God, they will. You know they will.
Right. I know they will already.
You know they will because there's nothing that Republicans do except things wrong.
Yeah, I heard that Tim Scott, he gave a little quick preview on Twitter, and he said, we're going to talk about how, we're a diverse nation, and in that's why we're so unified. And I'm like, no, we're not unified at all, man. That's exactly the opposite of the truth.
There must be something about Tim Scott because the Washington Post, a white guy in the Washington Post, wrote a fact check of Tim Scott saying he wasn't black enough, basically, that I guess he had some white people in his.
No, it wasn't that. It was that what they suggested is that he had said that his grandfather, he basically went from sharecropper to Congress in one generation. And they were like, yeah, but your father wasn't a sharecropper. If you go back to your grandfather and your great-grandfather, he had accumulated 500 acres in South Carolina. It's like, okay, so now you're just saying that he's the American dream in spite of vicious Jim Crow racism. Right. So, solid hit there, Washington.
I think that the Washington Post, which now basically has announced it's going to stop fact-checking Joe Biden. He's just that honest.
When do they ever start, though, is the question.
Well, they occasionally say this. I mean, Joe Biden, the funny thing is the difference between the way Joe Biden lies and Donald Trump lied is substantial. I mean, Donald Trump was an exaggerator, and he used to say, I exaggerate the truth. And that was actually pretty true for the most part. Obvious exceptions, but still, Biden just lied.
Well, I'll say it this way. I think that Trump lied casually. Like, if you're just in a conversation with him, he'd be the guy who'd be like, shaving 5 strokes off his handicap on the golf course,
exactly.
Right? Oh, yeah. That's what Trump is. Yeah. But Joe Biden is the kind of guy who lies purposefully. Like he's like, what do I need to say to achieve this effect? Yeah. And I'll just lie to do it, right? So I'll just say for months on end that Georgia's voting law is Jim Crow. Or I will just say over and over and over that you still need to mask up for no reason, right? Like no reason at all. Right. And that is a significantly worse form of lie because the thing about Trump and kind of the way that he would fib is that nobody took that stuff seriously. Like they kept fact-checking him. And I just kept thinking to myself, okay, and?
Well, before... And then none of that, they counted the lies and said, oh, he's lied so many more times. But there's a difference between saying I had a lot of people at my inauguration and saying this is just
the magnitude of the lie kind of matters. Like if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. It's a much bigger lie than there were so many people at my inauguration. Like one is a mild irritant that goes to character, and the other one is like you just lied about a massive piece of policy that affects hundreds of millions of Americans.
Also, the lies of the left are the reason that no one trusts government. We've been talking a lot about why people won't get the vaccine. I happen to think that the vaccine is one of the great, maybe the great scientific achievements of the 21st century.
My cell service has never been better.
Yeah. Well, it's the show. I think that it's up there with the Apollo program. It's up there with the Manhattan Project. It's amazing. It's hard for me to get the vaccine right now because I just don't want to be told what to do. I want to be free. But the reason so many millions of people on the right won't get the vaccine is because the government keeps lying about it, and the media keeps reinforcing those lies.
Well, let me just debunk real fast the Bill Gates put microchips in the vaccine. If he had, they'd be glitching all over.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There's no.
They wouldn't know where the hell we were.
The spinning color wheel of doom, right?
The new variants are just viruses from like the Eastern Europe somewhere. Yeah.
But this is the problem with the lies of the left. The lies of the left make you actually distrust
Yeah.
the institutions that are the only institutions that can create any unifying message of truth around things that do matter. Pandemics actually matter. They actually have consequences. We should be able to believe what the media and the government tell us about them. We can't. And we can't because people like Joe Biden have spent their entire career lying about such major issues whenever they think they can squeeze just a little bit of advantage out of them.
By the way, the left-wing media used to admit this about Biden before he was their guy.
Yeah.
Right.
There was, the most really disconcerting of his lies is, the central tragic fact of his life is his wife was killed in this car accident. And the guy who was in the other car felt terrible about this and lived for many years, and it was very sorry, but he was totally found to have been innocent. He wasn't drinking, nothing like that. Joe Biden never said he was. After the man died, Joe Biden on the campaign trail started to say he was a drunk who was drunk driving. It was a really vicious, vicious smear, so much so that I forget if it was the Atlantic or Vanity Fair called him out for this. It's such a deep, intentional lie. And it gets to the intrinsic dishonesty of his whole political career. The guy's been doing it since the 70s.
Well, it's also amazing that how many of these people are, right now, they're in the chamber. Every single person there is vaccinated. Every single person there is vaccinated. They're in a chamber, they're socially distanced and vaccinated, far away from each other, and they're all still wearing masks.
Yeah.
Because the same people who are telling you the vaccines are so important, which, by the way, they are telling you that you can never strip the mask off your face, even if you're vaccinated, which makes zero scientific sense. There's no data to back it, but it's just an article of faith now because Trump didn't like masks, and now we're just going to wear masks until we die.
They don't bother giving any data. They don't even.
They say they're insulted. They're insulted. If you're like, give us data, they're like, nope.
The only data they want is yours. And that's why you need to get ExpressVPN. A few decades ago, private citizens used to be, private. You want to know what changed? It's called the internet. Having a private life exposed for others to see used to be something that only people like Mickey Knowles had to worry about. Now it's an era where every single person online is essentially a public figure. That's why I use ExpressVPN to keep my data safe when I go online. Every time I turn on ExpressVPN, I'm given a random IP address that's shared by everyone else on ExpressVPN. That makes it more difficult for third parties to identify me and harvest my data. The best part is how easy ExpressVPN is to use. No matter what device you're on, your phone, your laptop, your smart TV, all you have to do is tap one button and you get protection. I really can't overemphasize how important it is in this day and age when your data gives people so much power over you. It lets them take your identity. It lets them steal your money. It lets them get you into all kinds of trouble. You don't need to subject yourself to these kinds of problems. So if you believe that your data is important, as I do, if you think it's important to your business, if you think it's important to your family, secure yourself with the #1 rated VPN on the market. Visit expressvpn.com/backstage and get 3 extra months for free. 3 months for free? What? Yep. Just go to expressvpn.com/backstage. expressvpn.com/backstage. You really need to protect yourself. Go do it right now. So I want to talk about the fact that we're looking at an almost empty chamber. This is supposed to be...
It's inspiring.
This is supposed to be a joint session of Congress. They're not even filling 50% of the seats, it doesn't look like. How did they determine who was going to be there?
So they gave a set number of seats to the Democrats and a set number to the Republicans.
If you were one of the Republicans and they said, only a few of you can go and you have to wear a diaper on your face, even though you've been vaccinated, why wouldn't you just say no?
So a bunch of them did. Steve Scalise said no.
Did he really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was like, I'm not interested. And honestly, why would you be? First of all, if I had any excuse not to go to the State of the Union, I would be there. I tried to get out of this.
Antonin Scalia famously would not attend. He thought, for the same reason, he thought it was ridiculous, anti-American nonsense.
Right. Biden should just send a letter to Congress saying, I'm going to do whatever I want. And actually, I'm just going to do whatever my chief of staff wants, Ron Klain, President Klain. And he's the one who's actually just going to write the agenda. Yeah. But the thing that's amazing about what we're watching is the media's attempt to build Joe Biden up into an important figure in his own right is pretty impressive because everybody really kind of secretly understands that Joe Biden is a truly unimpressive figure in American public life. Yeah. He really is. He's been a non-entity or a bloviating idiot for most of his career. And now he's president of the United States, and they are solely reliant on this man. Because if God forbid, and he's the president of the United States, you don't want to see anything bad happen to him. If God forbid something happens to Joe Biden, the Democratic agenda is DOA. It is dead. Because Kamala Harris saying the exact same stuff as Joe Biden is completely unpalatable to the American people. Yeah. Because Joe Biden does not give off a sense of threat. But he is an elderly dotard who does not know what the hell he's talking about. And so he's not threatening because houseplants are not threatening.
That's how he got away with the speech. The speech he gave yesterday was disgusting and repugnant. I mean, he's giving us permission to have a picnic if you're with vaccinated people, and if you're not, you have to mask at the picnic. I mean, since when is this a relationship we have with the government, that we have to tune in to the president to find out if we can have a picnic out at the park?
And to me, that wasn't even as radical as what he was saying last week about the Floyd trial, or the Chauvin trial, where he was literally coming out and just calling the country racist based on an incident where no one has yet presented any evidence of racism.
Or before that, or right after that. You talk about lies of Joe Biden and the Biden administration. I think hands down the worst lie we've heard from this administration, and perhaps any administration in recent memory, is what they said about the Ma'Khia Bryant situation, where she clearly 16-year-old girl, but she was in the process of trying to stab someone to death. That is very clear, indisputable. It's like a textbook good shoot by a police officer, valid, legitimate, and they come out and tie it to systemic racism. Yeah. They throw, this is a hero police officer put in that situation.
By the way, not only a good shoot in the sense of it was clean and legal and appropriate, a great shot.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, people like to say, "Oh, why didn't he shoot the gun, shoot the knife out of her hand?" Yeah. Well, because he's not the Lone Ranger. Why didn't the cop shoot her in the leg? Because if you actually watch that video, the fact that
a split second to hit her and not hit the girl,
that she's trying to stab. Not many trained police officers could have effectuated that shot as successfully as he did. He is a true American hero for what he did.
And he's also willing. Sorry, he's also. That police officer knows that his life might be over when he does this, but he did it anyway to save this other girl's life.
Yeah. It's incredibly telling when they say things like that, because it means they've never been in a physical altercation. Right. They have no idea the kind of adrenaline that pumps through your body. They have no idea what it takes to hit somebody's center. Here's
the thing: you're assuming honesty, and I don't even think that they honestly think what they're saying. Yeah. I rarely attribute bad motive to people, but that tape is so unbelievably clear. Yes. That it's just, there's no possible way that you could be motivated by anything other than a belief that every data point involving a black suspect and a white cop is bad. Mm-hmm. That is the only way that you can get to that conclusion after having watched that tape. You can't come to the honest conclusion after watching that tape that you should have shot her trigger finger like it's Blazing Saddles or something. Like, you can't.
But no, the very fact that they would ask that kind of question and expect to get away with it means that they have lived lives that are completely out of touch with the moment that they're reporting on. It doesn't even occur to them to go and say to somebody, you were a police officer who was in a shooting, you were a soldier who was in a battle. What's that like? What happens when you do
there is this thing about narrative, that narrative compounds narrative. Narrative builds upon narrative. I tweeted out this morning that COVID is to disease what nuclear weapons are to energy and explosives. And what I mean is that all the people who say, believe the science, don't actually know anything about the science. They don't believe the science. Instead, we've attributed to nuclear and we've attributed to COVID these sort of magical, mythical, destructive properties where they're actually not constrained by science. They have almost unlimited power to do unbelievable damage. And the problem is, over time, because of the power of narrative, experts, authoritative people actually believe not reality, but they believe. So when it comes to nuclear weapons, everybody believes that. Like, we have enough. People will say all the time. You will hear people in the military say, "We have enough nuclear weapons to wipe out all life on Earth 100 times," and that's absolutely absurd. Like, we have 1,000 strategic nuclear weapons in our arsenal, or something like that. For context, we detonated 1,000 nuclear weapons during the 50s and 60s, 65 miles north of Las Vegas. Yeah. A major American city, 65 miles north, we detonated 1,000 nuclear weapons. Like, nuclear weapons are bad. Nuclear weapons are very destructive compared to conventional ordinances. But they're still just things. It's just a bomb. COVID is a virus. COVID is a virus. That's all it is.
This is the entire thesis of the left, and has been for about 50 years, that narrative shapes reality. But the part they leave out is that it can shape it dishonestly or honestly.
Right.
So a narrative can be true or false. This is Yuval Harari wrote this book about what is different about humans than every other animal, is that we tell fictions. And among these fictions, he includes rights, money, religion. And you think, like, well, wait a minute. I've been making up fiction all my life. You can make a fiction that's true, or you can make a fiction that isn't true. Anybody who walks out of a movie theater can say, that wouldn't happen. That was unbelievable, right? The thing about money is a language. It is a language, but it's a language for expressing value. It's something we cannot tell how our minds calculate value, but they do it almost exactly. They do it to the penny, and money expresses that. It's a fiction that's true when it's not controlled by the government, when it's free exchange. the problem is not the narrative. It is the absolute disbelief that there is such a thing as a truth that goes beyond the physical facts of life. And now they don't even
Well, one of the
in
things
those.
that I've been noticing is that there have been a couple of polls in recent memory, like in the last month or so, talking about percentages of Americans who believe certain things about things that are factual.
Yeah.
Like how many black Americans get shot every year by the cops.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And that poll will show you that liberals are just way the hell off. Like they're off by a
They
factor.
think 1,000.
Right. They're off by a factor, and that's unarmed black men. Right. They'll say like 1,000 unarmed black men are shot. That's like 20.
Yeah,
Right. They're off by a factor of 50. Right. And then if you ask liberals, how likely are you to die of COVID? They'll be off by a factor of 10 or a factor of 20. Yeah. And then conservatives, these supposedly ascientific, data-free, fundamentalist crazies, if you ask them like, how likely are you to die of COVID? They're way closer to the actual reality than the liberals are. And the same thing about racial violence in America. They're way closer to the actual reality. Even they, by the way, even overestimate the number of black men who get shot in America.
But this is
every year.
this is why I'm saying narrative builds on narrative, because these reporters, not only have they never been in physical danger, not only have they never fired a firearm, everything that they believe about them, and they've researched, they believe they're experts, but everything that they know is just what someone else before them was saying when they were shaping the narrative.
Right.
So it compounds over time that people get more and more and more certain about things that they know less and less about. It's not that they don't, I mean, it really is Ronald Reagan. It's not that they don't know much. It's that everything they know.
There's a very famous line about the left, which is, unfortunately, you can sometimes apply it to the right, but it's so true with the left, which is they'll say, who cares if it works in practice? Does it work in theory? The obsession with theory, because that is a narrative.
And your reference to the Lone Ranger, by the way, is exactly dead on, because the Lone Ranger actually used to say, I only shoot to wound. It tells you where they're getting their information.
That's right.
They do get their information.
There's something else happening in the scientific community also, and it really it's true on everything from transgenderism and treatment for it to treatments for gender dysphoria to COVID, and that is what has become my new favorite word, because I just think it applies so often these days: ultra-crepidarianism. People just speaking outside of their purview of expertise. So scientists are not being asked anymore, sum up the data for me. Right, sum up the data for me. That's the question you ask a scientist. Instead, they're being asked questions like, what do you think Americans ought to do about masking or not masking? Yeah. That is a policy and or moral question.
Yeah.
Your job is to, like, I don't go to my doctor and then say to him, you know, what do you think that I should do with the rest of my life? Like, what decisions should I make in my life? He can tell me what the data suggest about what particular things will happen if I do X, Y, or Z. But that's not what the scientists are doing about COVID. Right. They're not doing any of that.
So what you need to do is go over to Policy Genius and get some affordable life insurance. And the reason that you need to do that is because it's a terrible thing to go through a family tragedy. If you think about leaving your loved ones behind, you think about the kind of pain that you're putting them through. What you may not have considered is the actual circumstances that you'll be subjecting them to where they don't have you there to provide for them. You need to protect them by getting life insurance. It's an important thing to do. It's the right thing to do. If you're a parent, it's an essential thing to do. Policy Genius can help you compare top insurers in one place and save 50% or more on your life insurance. Once you find your best option, the Policy Genius team will set up your new policy for you and answer any questions you have along the way. Since their licensed agents work for you, not the insurance companies, there's zero hassle. If you hit any speed bumps during the application process, Policy Genius will take care of everything. That kind of service has earned Policy Genius a 5-star rating across thousands of reviews on Trustpilot and Google. I've told you before that I use Policy Genius. I used it to get a life insurance policy for myself. I used it to get a life insurance policy for my wife. Very important because I don't want to leave my family in a bind. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I also used it to get a life insurance policy on Ben Shapiro. And that's because my ability to provide for my family is deeply and intrinsically connected to Ben's ability to keep talking incredibly fast. Policy Genius can promise that you won't leave their website feeling like a fool. You could save 50% or more by comparing life insurance quotes and feel good knowing that if something happens, your loved ones will be taken care of, by which I mean if something happens to Ben. Go to PolicyGenius.com and get started. Policy Genius. When it comes to insurance, it's nice to get it right. I really can't emphasize enough. It is a moral requirement, especially for someone with a family, to have life insurance. Guys, we're only a few minutes away from what promises to be a riveting speech, which from the video I'm seeing will be seen by at least 18 people in the House chamber.
How much
really,
pressure is
it's
on those guys
remarkable.
not to fall asleep?
Oh,
normally you got a chamber of
know.
like hundreds of people. And so
Right.
if you start to doze off, I think cameras will just shoot elsewhere.
Yeah.
But like if you start to lose it in the middle of this thing, cameras on you.
You pull the
man.
RBG, classically fell asleep. You know, there is something to remember as we go into this absolute snooze fest here, which is totally to your point, Ben. that now the scientific experts pontificate about everything that they don't know anything about, because it's the only sort of expertise we acknowledge in this country. We don't acknowledge philosophical, moral, or religious expertise. In self-government, citizens are supposed to be the experts on that sort of thing, but that's all gone now, and I bet he's not going to acknowledge it tonight either.
I want to know what any Republicans that chose to be a part of this charade with the masks on, I mean, they should be held accountable for that by the voters, because this is...
I actually agree with you.
This is a grotesque...
Yeah.
I'm actually... It's depressing and infuriating the more I watch this. And the fact that I got to sit now for an hour and watch it is making me... is causing me anxiety. But this spectacle... Look at the guy there in two masks.
Listen, I've been in a room since I was vaccinated. I've been in a room with like 350 other people, everybody unmasked. And if the media had been there, they would have been like, oh my God, we're all going to die of COVID. No one got COVID. You know why? Because everybody's either had COVID or they're vaccinated. Right. Everybody in that room is vaccinated.
Why did any Republican, every Republican there should have to explain why they...
Because Republicans are cowards.
Yeah.
They're there because they are cowards. And they're there because they're too afraid to stand up to the other side, which is not cowardly, but is decidedly convinced that they know what's good for you. They know they don't need the mask, but they're afraid that if they don't wear it, you might not wear it. And they want to control you. They want to determine what is good for you. They want to decide when you have a picnic with your family. And they'll say that they have good intentions. No, we just know that people will make bad decisions, and we're responsible for public health, and we need to protect the preponderance of people. You do that by arming people with good information and letting them make their own risk assessments. Instead, they're going to lie to you, pose for you, virtue signal for you, in order that they might own
What you don't get, Jeremy, is that the people are a bunch of deplorable, irredeemable idiots, and Maxine Waters is really, really smart.
And that's why they told us, the irony is that's why they told us originally not to mask, because they were treating us like idiots and children.
Yep.
And they thought we'd go and hoard all the masks. And
I actually asked my doctor, who is a far left guy, but a brilliant guy, I said, now I've been vaccinated, do I have to wear a mask? He said, no, but you should as a political statement. He said that to me, and I said, that's not my politics. Yeah. You know, there are fewer people in that chamber than watch the Oscars.
There's an entire
on TV.
article by this woman. There's an entire article by this woman on Medium about why she is still going to jog with a mask even after all of this is over. And she said it's because it's a sign that I care about my fellow man. Really, this is what she said. She says it's because I've been running around with the mask, and I've had the vaccine for 6 weeks, but, there's so many other people out there who get uncomfortable when I don't wear the mask that I've decided to wear the mask. And this goes to so many areas of our politics that if anything I do in my life to exercise my freedom makes you uncomfortable in any way, it is my job to curtail my freedom of speech. It is my job to curtail my freedom of the press, or my freedom to bear arms, or my freedom to walk around without a mask in order to make you feel more comfortable, even though I pose zero threat to you. That's where things are right now. By the way, we should note that the greatest doctor in America was just ushered into the chamber. Dr. Jill Biden.
Wow.
Absolutely.
She's a great surgeon. She's as Joy Behar pointed out, or Whoopi Goldberg, one of the two, she pointed that out. We should also acknowledge with the masks, I am not saying that the state can't take emergency police action sometime and say, hey, maybe you should wear the mask for a very short period of time. But to wear the mask all the time, to have the entirety of the American people wearing the secular keffiyeh, looking like banditos walking around, is actually disordered. It's actually bad for our politics.
People's brains have been broken. I think there's a real mental illness factor to it. One of my listeners left a comment under the YouTube video today saying that her aunt wears a mask to sleep, and I wish I could think that she's joking or making
I wear
that up,
one on my eyes.
This is what people are, and we're sending our kids to school. They wear masks for 7 hours a day.
I find the saddest comment, the ones I see on Twitter, people saying, what's so bad about a mask? And I think, like, really? Not to look at a human face, not to see a pretty girl, not to, not to know each other and smile at each other. I mean, what the hell?
Have you guys all had the weird experience over the past few months as people take off their masks, of people you've met with the mask on, and they take off the mask like, whoa.
Yeah.
I was not aware that you look like that. That's happened to many people with me. I'm like, they take off the mask, like, oh my God, that's what he looked like under there.
If you're an
it's
ugly,
like that scene from Phantom of the Opera. No.
If you're an ugly person with nice eyes, then you've been living
your best life.
I know. Last year.
Best life.
Well, eventually they're going to wheel Joe Biden in back. Everyone's going to cheer.
They may just lower him in.
They may,
the roof. They open the roof and just drop him in.
Like, here he comes out. Woo!
Matt, I have to say, Walsh is right. That Republicans showed up for this in masks. They actually should be answerable for that. That is.
So my understanding is that the reason that they are doing that is because Nancy Pelosi runs the chamber, and Chuck Schumer runs the chamber, and so there are actual, I believe, criminal penalties they're trying to attach for not wearing masks on the floor.
They should get
and they shouldn't go.
They should, yeah. But or if they get dragged out by the police and they're yelling for my civil rights to breathe and have my nose out, that would be beautiful politics.
That would be such a great moment, and these morons and cowards are too stupid to realize it.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Daily Wire.
You guys have no idea, by the way, if you go to leftist places like Brooklyn, and you don't wear a mask, which I haven't. I haven't worn a mask in public for a long time, outdoors. You are actually socially rejected. People get very, very upset. They actually take it badly. You
might as well be wearing a MAGA hat.
Yeah.
Well, so much of this is about that, right? It's because Trump made light of the masks originally, during the middle of the pandemic, and so the entire left decided that this was not just he was not just wrong on that, and it was not just a temporary expedient so that we could all go back to work or something.
Yeah.
What it really was a symbol that you were a good person who cared about other people to wear the mask.
It's the new pink hat. Right, it's just the pink hat of 2021.
If only Trump had been pro-mask, then no one would be wearing masks.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, they would open up the country a year ago.
He really let us down. Here's a question from a DailyWire.com subscriber. On one hand, it seems promising that states like Tennessee are lifting the mask mandate. I actually want to correct you. The state of Tennessee never had a mask mandate. Right. What happened is Governor Bill Lee made the bold step this week of saying that even the cities in the state that have had mask mandates must lift them before Memorial Day. But yes, places are removing their mask mandates. But when I see other states cracking down even more, like Michigan, I just really don't know how to feel on whether or not this will ever end. Do you think it will end? When? How? I just want to be perfectly clear. They're saying, do you believe the masks will ever end? Not what we're about to witness. Ben, what do you think?
So I think that this is going to last approximately another 5 months until Joe Biden gets a bunch more of his legislation passed, and then it stops. I think this is all about generating a feeling of crisis for Americans. I think that Joe Biden doesn't want this to go to the midterms, right? He would like to be able to declare victory before the midterms over COVID. And so I think that it'll last about as long as it's convenient for it to last. He said going in that we're facing 4 crises, and 3 of them are complete nonsense. It was like racial inequity, income inequality, climate change, and no one cares about climate change. Let's just be clear about this. Like, that doesn't mean it's not happening, but like on the list of American concerns, it's like number 87. And so the only one that people were actually worried about was COVID because, 500,000 people died of it. And so he's just prolonging this at this point. And so it'll last until he can ram through some more legislation by saying COVID has completely exposed so many terrible things about American society that must be fixed. It's unmasked all of American society. And then after we fixed all of American society and I can ride off into the nursing home, then at that point, everybody will be able to take off the masks and breathe free air again. I really think it's that simple.
I think it will last longer than that. Politically, I think you're right. But a lot of people, like we were just saying, their brains are broken.
Oh, no, I agree with this.
Yeah, a lot of people really, and they'll openly say it, I feel safer wearing it, and so I just wear it. And I don't think that goes away magically in 5 months. I don't know if it ever goes away. Yeah, I think it's a cultural change.
We'll never live to see a day where no one in America wears masks.
Yeah. This is the issue. Politics is downstream of culture. We all know that. That's the famous Breitbart doctrine. It is also true that politics can influence culture. The great example of this is that East Germany is still atheist. West Germany is not atheist because it was dominated by commies for the Cold War. People, because of the policies of our exalted leader, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the high priest of progressivism, he has, I think, broken people's brains. And I think you're going to see a lot of people who just insist on wearing this thing basically in perpetuity. Maybe it's not most of the country, but
I think a lot of people. What will happen is there's going to be a massive exacerbation of the big sort that's already happening. Right? People are just going to say, I don't want to live in a place that's like New York or like Michigan, where any moment they can just shut everything down again. And they move here, they go to Florida.
No, that's happening already. Coeur d'Alene is the place in Idaho. There's a place where most people are moving.
At least in the Civil War, we'll know which side people are on based on who's got the mask on. So.
That's exactly right. So we just saw Schumer enter the chamber, dutifully masked. This will be how we know. When will Republicans stop going along with it? When will airlines stop going along with it? That's as long as you have to wear a mask on an airline.
It's awful. It's really awful.
It makes it almost impossible.
I was so tolerant. I was way more tolerant than anybody else in this room with the masking. Right? I was like, because my parents are in their 60s, I was more tolerant of it. Then I got vaccinated, and it started to feel physically restricting to wear the mask because now I know it's pointless and stupid, and there's no reason for it at all.
Yeah.
The terrible thing about the airplane, too, is it's absolutely awful. It's the one place where it makes the most sense because airplanes are the terribly unhealthy atmosphere.
Well, except for the fact that it's not true.
Now
they were
it's
never. No, it wasn't at the beginning. Airplanes were not a vector of transmission.
You get
Airplanes
fresh
have
air,
HEPA filters.
Right? Yeah.
They have
I
HEPA
think-
filters and they circulate.
You notice, I noticed a real shift because I've been flying through this whole thing. I think a lot of us have.
Yeah.
And you notice the real shift at a certain point, a few months in, they weren't fidgeting with the mask anymore on the flight. They just wear it the whole time. They didn't have it under the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we were supposed to see that as a positive change, but I actually find it kind of creepy now. I'm on a plane for 6 hours and no one is even touching the mask. I mean, I still am, but everyone else just sits there.
By the way, we have
Joe
to point
Biden
out.
just entered the chamber.
So Biden entered the chamber. He's got his mask on, and he's doing the fist bumps with everybody because handshake, that'll spread COVID. Having
Your
the
knuckles
mask
are free
down,
of COVID, though.
But your knuckles, they're coated in Purell or something, so that's fine
Because science.
because of the science.
So now we have the President of the United States entering the chamber. We're going to go watch the President's speech. We'll be back with you as soon as it is over to give you our absolute expert analysis.
It was boring.
Yeah. Spoiler.
Save us some
Spoiler
time.
alert, yeah. We'll be back as soon as the President's speech is concluded.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good to be back. Mitch and Chuck will understand it's good to be almost home. Down the hall. Anyway, thank you all. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President. No president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words. And it's about time. First Lady, I'm her husband. Second Gentleman, Chief Justice, members of the United States Congress and the Cabinet, distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. While the setting tonight is familiar, this gathering is just a little bit different. A reminder of the extraordinary times we're in. Throughout our history, presidents have come to this chamber to speak to Congress, to the nation, and to the world, to declare war, to celebrate peace, to announce new plans and possibilities. Tonight, I come to talk about crisis and opportunity, about rebuilding the nation, revitalizing our democracy, and winning the future for America. I stand here tonight, one day shy of the 100th day of my administration. 100 days since I took the oath of office and lifted my hand off our family Bible and inherited a nation, we all did, that was in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, after just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again. turning peril into possibility, crisis to opportunity, setbacks into strength. We all know life can knock us down, but in America, we never, ever, ever stay down. Americans always get up. Today, that's what we're doing. America's rising anew, choosing hope over fear, truth over lies, and light over darkness. After 100 days of rescue and renewal, America is ready for a takeoff, in my view. We're working again, dreaming again, discovering again, and leading the world again. We have shown each other and the world that there's no quit in America, none. 100 days ago, America's house was on fire. We had to act. And thanks to the extraordinary leadership of Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Schumer, and the overwhelming support of the American people, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, we did act. Together, we passed the American Rescue Plan, one of the most consequential rescue packages in American history. We're already seeing the results. We're already seeing the results. After I promised we'd get 100 million COVID-19 vaccine shots into people's arms in 100 days, we will have provided over 220 million COVID shots in those 100 days. Thanks to all the help of all of you. We're marshaling, with your help, everyone's help, we're marshaling every federal resource. We've gotten vaccines to nearly 40,000 pharmacies and over 700 community health centers where the poorest of the poor can be reached. We're setting up community vaccination sites, developing mobile units to get to hard-to-reach communities. Today, 90% of Americans now live within 5 miles of a vaccination site. Everyone over the age of 16, everyone is now eligible to get vaccinated right now, right away. Go get vaccinated, America. Go and get the vaccination. They're available. You're eligible now. When I was sworn in on January 20th, less than 1% of the seniors in America were fully vaccinated against COVID-19. 100 days later, 70% of seniors in America over 65 are protected, fully protected. Senior deaths from COVID-19 are down 80% since January, down 80% because of all of you. And more than half of all the adults in America have gotten at least one shot. A mass vaccination center in Glendale, Arizona, I asked the nurse, I said, "What's it like?" She looked at me and she said, "It's like every shot is giving a dose of hope," was her phrase, a dose of hope. A dose of hope for an educator in Florida who has a child suffering from an autoimmune disease. Wrote to me, said she's worried, and she was worried about bringing the virus home. She said she then got vaccinated at a large site in her car. She said she sat in her car when she got vaccinated and just cried. Cried out of joy and cried out of relief. Parents, seeing the smiles on their kids' faces for those who are able to go back to school because the teachers and school bus drivers and cafeteria workers have been vaccinated. Grandparents, hugging their children and grandchildren instead of pressing hands against the window to say goodbye. It means everything. Those things mean everything. You know, there's still, you all know it, you know it better than any group of Americans, there's still more work to do to beat this virus. We can't let our guard down. But tonight, I can say, because of you, the American people, our progress these past 100 days against one of the worst pandemics in history has been one of the greatest logistical achievements this country's ever seen. What else have we done in those first 100 days? We kept our commitment, Democrats and Republicans, of sending $1,400 rescue checks to 85% of American households. We've already sent more than 160 million checks out the door. It's making a difference. You all know it when you go home. For many people, it's making all the difference in the world. The single mom in Texas who wrote me, she said she couldn't work, but she said the relief check put food on the table and saved her and her son from eviction from their apartment. A grandmother in Virginia who told me she immediately took her granddaughter to the eye doctor, something she said she put off for months because she didn't have the money. One of the defining images, at least from my perspective in this crisis, has been cars lined up for miles. And not people just barely able to start those cars, nice cars, lined up for miles, waiting for a box of food to be put in their trunk. I don't know about you, but I didn't ever think I'd see that in America. And all of this is through no fault of their own. No fault of their own, these people are in this position. That's why the rescue plan is delivering food and nutrition assistance to millions of Americans facing hunger. And hunger's down sharply already. We're also providing rental assistance. You all know this, but the American people, I want to make sure they understand. Keeping people from being evicted from their homes. Providing loans to small businesses that reopen and keep their employees on the job. During these 100 days, an additional 800,000 Americans enrolled in the Affordable Care Act when I established a special sign-up period to do that. 800,000 in that period. We're making one of the largest one-time ever investments, ever, in improving health care for veterans. Critical investments to address the opioid crisis. And maybe most importantly, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, we're on track to cut child poverty in America in half this year. And in the process, while this was all going on, the economy created more than 1,300,000 new jobs in 100 days. More jobs in the first 100 days than any president on record. The International Monetary Fund is now estimating our economy will grow at a rate of more than 6% this year. That will be the fastest pace of economic growth in this country in nearly 4 decades. America's moving forward, but we can't stop now. We're in competition with China and other countries to win the 21st century. We're at a great inflection point in history. We have to do more than just build back better. We have to build back better. We have to compete more strenuously than we have. Throughout our history, if you think about it, public investment in infrastructure has literally transformed America, our attitudes as well as our opportunities. The Transcontinental Railroad, the interstate highways, united 2 oceans and brought a totally new age of progress to the United States of America. Universal public schools and college aid opened wide the doors of opportunity. Scientific breakthroughs took us to the moon. Now we're on Mars. Discovering vaccines gave us the internet, and so much more. These are investments we made together as one country, and investments that only the government was in a position to make. Time and again, They propel us into the future. That's why I proposed the American Jobs Plan, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself. This is the largest jobs plan since World War II. Creates jobs to upgrade our transportation infrastructure. Jobs modernizing our roads, bridges, highways. Jobs building ports and airports, rail corridors, transit lines. It's clean water. And today, up to 10 million homes in America and more than 400,000 schools and child care centers have pipes with lead in them, including drinking water. A clear and present danger to our children's health. American Jobs Plan creates jobs replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, so every American can drink clean water. And in the process, will create thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs. It creates jobs connecting every American with high-speed internet, including 35% of the rural America that still doesn't have it. This is going to help our kids and our businesses succeed in the 21st century economy. And I'm asking the Vice President to lead this effort, if she would, because I know it will get done. Creates jobs building a modern power grid. Our grids are vulnerable to storms, hacks, catastrophic failures with tragic results, as we saw in Texas and elsewhere during the winter storms. The American Jobs Plan will create jobs that lay thousands of miles of transmission lines needed to build a resilient and fully clean grid. We can do that. Look, the American Jobs Plan will help millions of people get back to their jobs and back to their careers. 2 million women have dropped out of the workforce during this pandemic. 2 million. And too often because they couldn't get the care they needed to care for their child or care for an elderly parent who needs help. 800,000 families are on the Medicare waiting list right now to get home care for their aging parent or loved one with disability. If you think it's not important, check out in your own district, Democrat or Republican. Democrat or Republican voters. Their great concern, almost as much as their children, is taking care of an elderly loved one who can't be left alone. Medicaid contemplated it, but this plan is going to help those families and create jobs for our caregivers with better wages and better benefits, continuing a cycle of growth. For too long, we've failed to use the most important word when it comes to meeting the climate crisis: jobs. 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 For me, when I think climate change, I think jobs. The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work building more energy-efficient buildings and homes. Electrical workers, IBEW members installing 500,000 charging stations along our highways so we can own the electric car market. Farmers planting cover crops so they can reduce the carbon dioxide in the air and get paid for doing it. Look, think about it. There is simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing. No reason. None. No reason. So, folks, there's no reason why American American workers can't lead the world in the production of electric vehicles and batteries. I mean, there is no reason. We have the capacity. We're the brightest, best trained people in the world. The American Jobs Plan is going to create millions of good-paying jobs, jobs Americans can raise a family on. As my dad would then say, with a little breathing room. And all the investments in the American Job Plan will be guided by one principle: buy American. Buy American. And I might note parenthetically, that does not violate any trade agreement. It's been the law since the 30s. Buy American. American tax dollars are going to be used to buy American products made in America to create American jobs. That's the way it's supposed to be, and it will be in this administration. And I made it clear to all my cabinet people, their ability to give exemptions has been strenuously limited. It will be American products. Now, I know some of you at home are wondering whether these jobs are for you. So many of you, so many of the folks I grew up with, feel left behind, forgotten, in an economy that's so rapidly changing. It's frightening. I want to speak directly to you, because you think about it. That's what people are most worried about. Can I fit in? Independent experts estimate the American Jobs Plan will add millions of jobs and trillions of dollars to economic growth in the years to come. It is an 8-year program. These are good-paying jobs that can't be outsourced. Nearly 90% of the infrastructure jobs created in the American Jobs Plan do not require a college degree. 75% don't require an associate's degree. The American Jobs Plan is a blue-collar blueprint to build America. That's what it is. And it recognizes something I've always said in this chamber and the other. Good guys and women on Wall Street, but Wall Street didn't build this country. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. So that's why I'm calling on Congress to pass Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, and send it to my desk so we can support the right to unionize. And by the way, while you're thinking about sending things to my desk, let's raise the minimum wage to $15. No one working 40 hours a week, should live below the poverty line. We need to ensure greater equity and opportunity for women. And while we're doing this, let's get the Paycheck Fairness Act to my desk as well, equal pay. It's been much too long. And if you wonder whether it's too long, look behind me. And finally, the American Jobs Plan will be the biggest increase in non-defense research and development on record. We'll see more technological change, and some of you know more about this than I do. We'll see more technological change in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 50. That's how rapidly artificial intelligence and so much more is changing. And we're falling behind the competition with the rest of the world. Decades ago, we used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in America, 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. Today, Mr. Secretary, that's less than 1%. China and other countries are closing in fast. We have to develop and dominate the products and technologies of the future. Advanced batteries, biotechnology, computer chips, clean energy. The Secretary of Defense can tell you, and those of you who work on national security issues know, the Defense Department has an agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. The people who set up before I came here, and that's been a long time ago, to develop breakthroughs that enhance our national security. That's their only job. And it's a semi-separate agency. It's under the Defense Department. It's led to everything from the discovery of the internet to GPS and so much more that's enhanced our security. The National Institute of Health, the NIH, I believe, should create a similar advanced research projects agency for health. And here's what it would do. It would have a singular purpose: to develop breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. I'll still never forget when we passed the cancer proposal in the last year I was vice president. Almost $9 million going to NIH. And if excused the point of personal privilege, I'll never forget you standing, Mitch, and saying, "Name it after my deceased son." It meant a lot. But so many of us have deceased sons, daughters, and relatives who died of cancer. I can think of no more worthy investment. I know of nothing that is more bipartisan. So let's end cancer as we know it. It's within our power. It's within our power to do it. Investments in jobs and infrastructure like the ones we're talking about have often had bipartisan support in the past. Vice President Harris and I met regularly in the Oval Office with Democrats and Republicans and discussed the jobs plan. And I applaud a group of Republican senators who just put forward their own proposal. So let's get to work. I wanted to lay out before the Congress my plan before we got into the deep discussions. I'd like to meet with those who have ideas that are different, they think are better. I welcome those ideas. But the rest of the world is not waiting for us. I just want to be clear. From my perspective, doing nothing is not an option. Look, we can't be so busy competing with one another that we forget the competition that we have with the rest of the world to win the 21st century. Secretary Blinken can tell you, I spent a lot of time with President Xi. Traveled over 17,000 miles with him. Spent, they tell me, over 24 hours in private discussions with him. When he called to congratulate him, we had a 2-hour discussion. He's deadly earnest about becoming the most significant, consequential nation in the world. He and others, autocrats, think that democracy can't compete in the 21st century with autocracies because it takes too long to get consensus. To win that competition for the future, in my view, we also need to make a once-in-a-generation investment in our families and our children. That's why I've introduced the American Families Plan tonight, which addresses 4 of the biggest challenges facing American families and in turn America. First is access to good education. When this nation made 12 years of public education universal in the last century, it made us the best educated, best prepared nation in the world. It's, I believe, the overwhelming reason that propelled us to where we got in the 20th century. But the world's caught up or catching up. They're not waiting. I would say parenthetically, If we were sitting down, we set a bipartisan committee together and said, okay, we're going to decide what we do in terms of government providing for free education. I wonder whether we'd think, as we did in the 20th century, that 12 years is enough in the 21st century. I doubt it. 12 years is no longer enough today to compete with the rest of the world in the 21st century. That's why my American Families Plan guarantees 4 additional years of public education for every person in America, starting as early as we can. The great universities in this country have conducted studies of the last 10 years. It shows that adding 2 years of universal high-quality preschool for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old, no matter what background they come from, puts them in the position to be able to compete all the way through 12 years and increases exponentially their prospect of graduating and going on beyond graduation. The research shows when a young child goes to school, not daycare, they're far more likely to graduate from high school and go to college or something after high school. When you add 2 years of free community college on top of that, you begin to change the dynamic. We can do that. And we'll increase Pell Grants and invest in historical black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, minority-serving institutions. The reason is they don't have the endowments. But their students are just as capable of learning about cybersecurity, just as capable of learning about metallurgy, all the things that are going on that provide those jobs of the future. Jill is a community college professor who teaches today as First Lady. She's long said, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. Joe, any country that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. She'll be deeply involved in leading this effort. Thank you, Jill. Second thing we need, American Families Plan will provide access to quality, affordable child care. We guarantee when I'm proposing in legislation, we guarantee that low and middle income families will pay no more than 7% of their income for high-quality care for children up to the age of 5. The most hard-pressed working families won't have to spend a dime. Third, the American Families Plan will finally provide up to 12 weeks of paid leave and medical leave, family medical leave. We're one of the few industrial countries in the world. No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck, or taking care of themselves and their loved ones, or parent, or spouse, or child. And fourth, the American Family Plan puts directly into the pockets of millions of Americans. In March, we expanded tax credit for every child in a family, up to $3,000 per child if you're under 6 years of age. Over 6 years of age. And $3,600 for children over 6 years of age. With 2 parents, 2 kids, that's $7,200 in the pockets that are going to help take care of your family. And that will help more than 65 million children and help cut child care poverty in half. And we can afford it. So we did that in the last piece of legislation we passed. But let's extend that child care tax credit at least through the end of 2025. The American Rescue Plan lowered health care premiums for 9 million Americans who buy their coverage under the Affordable Care Act. I know that's really popular this side of the aisle. But let's make that provision permanent so their premiums don't go back up. In addition to my family's plan, I'm going to work with Congress to address this year other critical priorities for American families. The Affordable Care Act has been a lifeline for millions of Americans, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, protecting women's health, and the pandemic has demonstrated how badly it's needed. Let's lower deductibles for working families on the Affordable Care Act. And let's lower prescription drug costs. We know how to do this. The last president had that as an objective. We all know how outrageously expensive drugs are in America. In fact, we pay the highest prescription drug prices of anywhere in the world, right here in America. Nearly 3 times for the same drug, nearly 3 times what other countries pay. We have to change that, and we can. Let's do what we talked about for all the years I was down here in this body, in Congress. Let's give Medicare the power to save hundreds of billions of dollars by negotiating lower drug prescription prices. And by the way, it won't just help people on Medicare. Lower prescription drug costs for everyone. And the money we save, which is billions of dollars, can go to strengthen the Affordable Care Act and expand Medicare coverage benefits without costing taxpayers an additional penny. It's within our power to do it. Let's do it now. We've talked about it long enough, Democrats and Republicans. Let's get it done this year. This is all about a simple premise. Health care should be a right, not a privilege in America. So, how do we pay for my jobs and family plan? I made it clear we can do it without increasing the deficits. Let's start with what I will not do. I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000. But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. Just their fair share. Sometimes I have arguments with my friends in the Democratic Party. I think you should be able to become a billionaire and a millionaire, but pay your fair share. A recent study shows that 55 of the nation's biggest corporations paid 0 federal tax last year. Those 55 corporations made in excess of $40 billion in profit. A lot of companies also evade taxes through tax havens in Switzerland and Bermuda and the Cayman Islands. And they benefit from tax loopholes and deductions for offshoring jobs and shifting profits overseas. It's not right. We're going to reform corporate taxes so they pay their fair share and help pay for the public investments their businesses will benefit from as well. We're going to reward work, not just wealth. We take the top tax bracket for the wealthiest 1% of Americans, those making over $400,000 or more, back up to where it was when George W. Bush was president, when he started, 39.6%. That's where it was when George W. was president. We're going to get rid of the loopholes, allow Americans to make more than $1 million a year and pay a lower tax rate on their capital gains than Americans who receive a paycheck. We're only going to affect 0.3% of all Americans by that action, 0.3%. And the IRS is going to crack down on millionaires and billionaires who cheat on their taxes. It's estimated to be billions of dollars by think tanks that are left, right, and center. I'm not looking to punish anybody, but I will not add a tax burden, additional tax burden to the middle class in this country. They're already paying enough. I believe what I propose is fair, fiscally responsible, and it raises revenue to pay for the plans I propose and will create millions of jobs that will grow the economy and enhance our financial standing in the country. When you hear someone say they don't want to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% or corporate America, ask them, whose taxes you want to raise? Instead, whose are you going to cut? Look, the big tax cut of 2017. Remember, it was supposed to pay for itself. That was how it was sold. And generate vast economic growth. Instead, it added $2 trillion to the deficit. It was a huge windfall for corporate America and those at the very top. Instead of using the tax saving to raise wages and invest in research and development, it poured billions of dollars into the pockets of CEOs. In fact, the pay gap between CEOs and their workers is now among the largest in history. According to one study, CEOs make 320 times what the average worker in their corporation makes. It used to be below 100. The pandemic has only made things worse. 20 million Americans lost their job in the pandemic, working and middle-class Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. Let me say it again. 650 people increased their wealth by more than $1 trillion during this pandemic. And they're now worth more than $4 trillion. My fellow Americans, trickle down. Trickle down economics has never worked. And it's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out. You know, there's a broad consensus of economists left, right, and center, and they agree what I'm proposing will help create millions of jobs and generate historic economic growth. These are among the highest values investments we can make as a nation. I've often said our greatest strength is the power of our example, not just the example of our power. In my conversations with world leaders, and I've spoken to over 38, 40 of them now, I've made it known that America's back. And you know what they say? The comment I hear most of all from them is they say, we see America's back, but for how long? But for how long? My fellow Americans, we have to show not just that we're back, but that we're back to stay, and that we aren't going to go it alone. We're going to do it by leading with our allies. No one nation can deal with all the crises of our time, from terrorism to nuclear proliferation, mass migration, cybersecurity, climate change, as well as what we're experiencing now, pandemics. There's no wall high enough to keep any virus out. And our own vaccine supply, as it grows to meet our needs, and we're meeting them, will become an arsenal for vaccines for other countries, just as America is an arsenal for democracy for the world, and in consequence influence the world. But every American will have access before that occurs. Every American will have access to be fully covered by COVID-19 from the vaccines we have. Look, the climate crisis is not our fight alone. It's a global fight. The United States accounts, as all of you know, less than 15% of carbon emissions. The rest of the world accounts for 85%. That's why I kept my commitment to rejoin the Paris Accord, because if we do everything perfectly, it's not going to only matter. I kept my commitment to convene a climate summit right here in America with all the major economies of the world: China, Russia, India, European Union. And I said I'd do it in my first 100 days. I want to be very blunt about it. I had my attempt was to make sure that the world could see there was a consensus, that we are at an inflection point in history. The consensus is if we act to save the planet, we can create millions of jobs and economic growth and opportunity to raise the standard of living of almost everyone around the world. If you watched any of it and you were all busy, I'm sure you didn't have much time. That's what virtually every nation said, even the ones that aren't doing their fair share. The investments I proposed tonight also advance the foreign policy, in my view, that benefits the middle class. That means making sure every nation plays by the same rules in the global economy, including China. In my discussion with President Xi, I told him, we welcome the competition. We're not looking for conflict. But I made absolutely clear that we will defend America's interest across the board. America will stand up to unfair trade practices that undercut American workers and American industries, like subsidies from state to state-owned operations and enterprises, and the theft of American technology and intellectual property. I also told President Xi that we'll maintain a strong military presence in the Indo-Pacific, just as we do with NATO and Europe, not to start a conflict, but to prevent one. I told them what I've said to many world leaders, that America will not back away from our commitments, our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to our alliances. And I pointed out to him, no responsible American president could remain silent when basic human rights are being so blatantly violated. An American president has to represent the essence of what our country stands for. America is an idea, the most unique idea in history. We are created, all of us, equal. It's who we are. And we cannot walk away from that principle and, in fact, say we're dealing with the American idea. With regard to Russia, I know it concerns some of you, but I made very clear to Putin that we're not going to seek escalation, but their actions will have consequences if they turn out to be true, and they turned out to be true. So I responded directly and proportionately to Russia's interference in our elections and the cyber attacks on our government and our business. They did both of these things, and I told them we would respond, and we have. But we can also cooperate when it's our mutual interest. We did it when we extended the New START Treaty on nuclear arms, and we're working to do it on climate change. But he understands we will respond. On Iran and North Korea, nuclear programs that present serious threats to American security and the security of the world. We're going to be working closely with our allies to address the threats posed by both of these countries through diplomacy as well as stern deterrence. And American leadership means ending the forever war in Afghanistan. We have without hyperbole, the greatest fighting force in the history of the world. I'm the first president in 40 years who knows what it means to have a son serving in a war zone. Today, we have service members serving in the same war zone as their parents did. We have service members in Afghanistan who are not yet born on 9/11. The war in Afghanistan, as we remember the debates here, were never meant to be multi-generational undertakings of nation building. We went to Afghanistan to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. And we said we would follow Osama bin Laden to the gates of hell to do it. If you've been in the upper Konar Valley, you've kind of seen the gates of hell. And we delivered justice to bin Laden. We degraded the terrorist threat of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And after 20 years of valor, and sacrifice, it's time to bring those troops home. Look, even as we do, we'll maintain over-the-horizon capacity to suppress future threats to the homeland. And make no mistake, in 20 years, terrorism has metastasized. The threat has evolved way beyond Afghanistan. Those of you in the intelligence committees, the Foreign Relations Committee, defense committees, you know well we have to remain vigilant against the threats to the United States wherever they come from. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are in Yemen, Syria, Somalia, other places in Africa, in the Middle East, and beyond. And we won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy is terrorism. We're not going to ignore that either. My fellow Americans, look, we have to come together to heal the soul of this nation. It was nearly a year ago before her father's funeral when I spoke with Gianna Floyd, George Floyd's young daughter. She's a little tyke, so I was kneeling down to talk to her so I could look her in the eye. She looked at me, she said, "My daddy changed the world." Well, after the conviction of George Floyd's murderer, we can see how right she was if we have the courage to act as a Congress. We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of Black Americans. Now's our opportunity to make some real progress. The vast majority of men and women wearing a uniform and a badge serve our communities, and they serve them honorably. I know them. I know they want... I know they want to help meet this moment as well. My fellow Americans, we have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already. I know Republicans have their own ideas and are engaged in very productive discussions with Democrats in the Senate. We need to work together to find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death. The country supports this reform, and Congress should act. We have a giant opportunity to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, real justice. And with the plans outlined tonight, we have a real chance to root out systemic racism that plagues America and American lives in other ways. A chance to deliver real equity, good jobs, good schools, affordable housing, clean air, clean water, being able to generate wealth and pass it down through generations because you have access to purchase a house. Real opportunities in the lives of more Americans, Black, white, Latino, Asian Americans, Native Americans. Look, I also want to thank the United States Senate for voting 94-1 to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to protect Asian American and Pacific Islanders. You acted decisively. You can see on television the viciousness of the hate crimes we've seen over the past year and for too long. I urge the House to do the same and send that legislation to my desk, which I will gladly, anxiously sign. I also hope Congress will get to my desk the Equality Act to protect LGBTQ Americans. For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back. Another thing, let's authorize the Violence Against Women Act, which has been law for 27 years. "27 years ago, I wrote it. It'll close the act that has to be authorized now, will close the boyfriend loophole to keep guns out of the hands of abusers. The court order said this is an abuser. You can't own a gun. It's to close that loophole that existed. You know, it's estimated that 50 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner every month in America. 50 a month. Let's pass it and save some lives. And I need not tell anyone this, but gun violence has become an epidemic in America. The flag at the White House was still flying at half-mast for the 8 victims of the mass shooting in Georgia, when 10 more lives were taken in a mass shooting in Colorado. And in the week in between those two events, 250 other Americans were shot dead in the streets of America. 250 shot dead. I know how hard it is to make progress on this issue. In the 90s, we passed universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that hold 100 rounds that can be fired off in seconds. We beat the NRA. Mass shootings and gun violence declined. Check out the report over 10 years. But in the early 2000s, the law expired. We've seen daily bloodshed since. I'm not saying if the law continued, we wouldn't see bloodshed. More than 2 weeks ago in the Rose Garden, surrounded by some of the bravest people I know, the survivors and families who lost loved ones to gun violence, I laid out several of the Department of Justice actions that are being taken to impact on this epidemic. One of them is banning so-called ghost guns. These are homemade guns built from a kit that includes directions how to finish the firearm. The parts have no serial numbers, so they show up at crime scenes and they can't be traced. The buyers of these ghost gun kits aren't required to pass any background check. Anyone, from a criminal or terrorist, could buy this kit and within 30 minutes have a weapon that's lethal, but no more. And I'll do everything in my power to protect the American people from this epidemic of gun violence, but it's time for Congress to act as well. Look, I don't want to become confrontational, but we need more Senate Republicans to join the overwhelming majority of Democratic colleagues and close the loopholes required in background check purchases of guns. We need a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And don't tell me it can't be done. We did it before and it worked. Talk to most responsible gun owners and hunters. They'll tell you there's no possible justification for having 100 rounds in a weapon. What do you think, deer are wearing Kevlar vests? And they'll tell you that there are too many people today who are able to buy a gun but shouldn't be able to buy a gun. These kinds of reasonable reforms have overwhelming support from the American people, including many gun owners. The country supports reform and Congress should act. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. And no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. From the very beginning, there were certain guns, weapons, that could not be owned by Americans. Certain people could not own those weapons ever. We're not changing the Constitution. We're being reasonable. I think this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I think it's an American issue. And here's what else we can do. Immigration has always been essential to America. Let's end our exhausting war over immigration. For more than 30 years, politicians have talked about immigration reform, and we've done nothing about it. It's time to fix it. On day one of my presidency, I kept my commitment and sent a comprehensive immigration bill to the United States Congress. If you believe we need to secure the border, pass it, because it has a lot of money for high-tech border security. If you believe in a pathway to citizenship, pass it. There's over 11 million undocumented folks, the vast majority of here overstaying visas. Pass it. We can actually, if you actually want to solve a problem, I've sent a bill to take a close look at it. We also have to get at the root problem of why people are fleeing, particularly to our southern border from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The violence, the corruption, the gangs, the political instability, hunger, hurricanes, earthquakes, natural disasters. When I was president, when I was vice president, the president asked me to focus on providing help needed to address the root causes of migration. And it helped keep people in their own countries instead of being forced to leave. The plan was working, but the last administration decided it was not worth it. I'm restoring the program and asked Vice President Harris to lead our diplomatic effort to take care of this. I have absolute confidence she'll get the job done. Now look, if you don't like my plan, let's at least pass what we all agree on. Congress needs to pass legislation this year to finally secure protection for dreamers. The young people who've only known America as their home. And permanent protection for immigrants who are here on temporary protective status who came from countries beset by man-made and natural-made violence and disaster. As well as the pathway to citizenship for farm workers who put food on our tables. Look, immigrants have done so much for America during this pandemic and throughout our history. The country supports immigration reform. We should act. Let's argue over it. Let's debate it. But let's act. And if we truly want to restore the soul of America, we need to protect the sacred right to vote. Most people more people voted in the last presidential election than any time in American history, in the middle of the worst pandemic ever. It should be celebrated. Instead, it's being attacked. Congress should pass H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and send it to my desk right away. The country supports it, and Congress should act now. Look, in conclusion, as we gather here tonight, the image of a violent mob assaulting this Capitol, desecrating our democracy, remain vivid in all our minds. Lives were put at risk, many of your lives. Lives were lost. Extraordinary courage was summoned. The insurrection was an existential crisis, a test of whether our democracy could survive, and it did. But the struggle is far from over. The question of whether our democracy will long endure is both ancient and urgent. As old as our republic, still vital today. Can our democracy deliver on its promise that all of us, created equal in the image of God, had a chance to lead lives of dignity, respect, and possibility? Can our democracy deliver to the most pressing needs of our people? Can our democracy overcome the lies, anger, hate, and fears that have pulled us apart? America's adversaries, the autocrats of the world, are betting we can't. And I promise you they're betting we can't. They believe we're too full of anger and division and rage. They look at the images of the mob that assaulted the Capitol as proof that the sun is setting on American democracy. But they're wrong. You know it, I know it. But we have to prove them wrong. We have to prove democracy still works, that our government still works, and we can deliver for our people. In our first 100 days together, we've acted to restore people's faith in democracy to deliver. We're vaccinating the nation. We're creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs. We're delivering real results to people. They can see it, feel it in their own lives. Opening doors of opportunity, guaranteeing some more fairness and justice. That's the essence of America. That's democracy in action. Our Constitution opens with the words, as trite as it sounds, we the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government. You and I. Not some force in a distant capital. Not some powerful force that we have no control over. It's us. It's we the people. In another era, when our democracy was tested, Franklin Roosevelt reminded us, in America, we do our part. We all do our part. That's all I'm asking. That we do our part, all of us. That if we do that, we will meet the center challenge of the age by proving that democracy is durable and strong. Autocrats will not win the future. We will. America will. And the future belongs to America. As I stand here tonight before you in a new and vital hour of life and democracy of our nation, and I can say with absolute confidence, I have never been more confident or optimistic about America. Not because I'm president, because of what's happening with the American people. We've stared into the abyss of insurrection and autocracy, pandemic and pain, and we, the people, did not flinch. At the very moment our adversaries were certain we'd pull apart and fail, we came together, we united. With light and hope, we summoned a new strength, new resolve to position us to win the competition of the 21st century. On our way to a union more perfect, more prosperous, and more just, as one people, one nation, and one America. Folks, as I told every world leader I've ever met with over the years, it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America, and it still isn't. We're the United States of America. There's not a single thing, nothing beyond our capacity. We can do whatever we set our minds to if we do it together. So let's begin to get together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience.
The President of the United States concluding his first 100 days in office and his first State of the Union address with the greatest line in the history of State of the Union addresses. Thank you for your patience.
Jeremy, before we get into it, should someone wake Ben up?
Benjamin.
Wait, I think he's gone.
Oh, he's good.
Thank God you have life insurance on him.
What?
Yeah.
That was the worst thing I've ever.
That was genuinely terrible.
Let's begin to get together, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the line.
We're just gonna
Let's begin to get
do
together.
60 song lyrics now.
Well, it's funny that you bring up 60 song lyrics because it was a 1960s boilerplate speech.
Yes,
Yes,
it was.
it was.
It was a 1930s boilerplate speech
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
It was a
And
1330s.
And you know, it was that line where he said, "We the people are the government," because he doesn't mean that we the people form the government. What he means is the government are the people.
No,
that
he was
serving.
explicit. He said, we are the people.
So we're not a distant force. We're you.
Yeah, and
Okay, then if you're me, then shut the up.
I mean, everything he says, you know, when he talks about, he had this line, American tax dollars are going to buy American property and build American jobs. That's actually not the way it works. As always with socialists, they never ask the question, where does the money come from? It comes from horrible, evil, dastardly capitalists like yourself, who they take that tax money from. Just simple logic. Simple logic tells you that you can create more jobs with $1 than a company than a government that takes your dollar away, distributes it among its bureaucracies, and then creates a job. So you're going to create 10 times more jobs.
I have a question. We can focus on the content as much as we want. This guy's not making it 4 years, is he?
It doesn't feel like it.
He
No.
looks absolutely ghastly.
Well,
he looks awful. He sounds
Slurring his
awful.
speech.
He
That
can be
seemed
slurring his speech.
like 4 years. Does that count?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how anyone thinks he's running for re-election. I don't know how you can.
I don't know that anyone thinks he's running for re-election.
I just
The question is, will he serve out a term?
but here's the thing. What the speech makes clear is two things. One, he's not going to make it for re-election. I mean, he's just not. And two, they desperately need this guy.
Yeah.
They need him so badly.
Yeah.
Because if you actually just read the text of the speech, what you will see is a litany of spending and regulation and taxation and big government and rethinking of the fundamental relationship between the American people and the government. That sounds like it's coming directly from Bernie Sanders. I mean, it is extraordinarily radical stuff. But because the person who is saying it is a mushmouth old man that nobody fears because he is a mushmouth old man, they are deeply...
He's been around forever.
Yeah, well, not just that, because I honest to God wonder if the entire design of the speech, because he backloaded all the controversial stuff you noticed about how America's racist and about how the government is the people. He put all of that in the last 10 minutes of the speech. I honest to God wonder whether his strategy here was, I will just bore you into unconsciousness so you don't actually know what I'm saying. And I can go to the left and I can tell them I said all the stuff that I said. And then I can use that as the predicate for all of the things I want to pass. But you went to sleep, right? Wasn't that scary? You fell asleep.
That's right.
Because that's what it was. I mean, Joe Biden is capable. He could have done what he's done before, which is do a 25-minute speech.
Yeah.
Right? Do it like he could do that. He could go in there, give a 25-minute speech. Instead, he goes for an hour and a half. It is soporific nonsense. And he can't even speak it clearly. I mean, he's stumbling over his own words. He's repeating himself. And you get to the end, you kind of feel bad for the guy. You're like, this guy is not with it. But then you actually read what he's saying, and he's talking about spending not $10 trillion. He's talking about spending, I'm sure, at least twice that when you add up everything that he's talking about over the course of years. And you're supposed to just be like, well, he's a nice old gentleman. I guess that was okay, and it was good for the country. And I can't wait to see the media reactions. Right? The media reactions will, if you can get to the sort of climax the media will reach based on that speech, hats off to you, man. I mean, that, at that point, you definitely don't need Get Roman because there's something going on here.
Yeah,
it's not.
Bill Whittle talks about this idea of government as we the people as eloquently as anyone I've ever heard discuss it. Essentially, the Constitution is a legal compact between three groups. The federal government, which it is creating, the states, and the people. We the people is the people who are consenting to the creation of this federal government. Saying we the having the President of the United States say, we up here, we're you, we the people are the government, would be akin to in any criminal case if the defendant said, no, we the plaintiff.
Yeah. Well,
we the plaintiff.
You see, the trick of the whole thing that the left has been pushing in overdrive for the past year is this blurring of the distinction between the federal government and the state government. Right now, H.R. 1, the first thing they're taking up, is designed to steal all that power from the states, particularly over elections. What could go wrong there, right? Congressmen writing their own election laws and the people. But then what they're doing is they're outsourcing all of that political power, per Woodrow Wilson and the progressives for a century, to these bureaucrats that are, it's the random agencies that are really making the laws.
There's something else that's happening when they say that we, the people, are the government. And that is that what our government originally was supposed to be was a limited government designed to protect individual rights. That's what it's in the Declaration of Independence. It's in the Constitution of the United States, the government of enumerated powers. But there's something else there, too. It's a government of checks and balances specifically created in order to protect those rights. When you say we, the people, are the government, what you are saying is that checks and balances are a bad. They're an obstacle. Yeah. Because the people are the government. And if the people collectively are the government, well, then they don't have arguments among themselves. They don't have checks and balances. You don't need checks and balances. Checks and balances are a bar to what he calls democracy in action.
That's what the Democrats have been saying since Wilson.
Which is called mob rule.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that it was Lincoln who basically declared that the Declaration was the philosophy behind the Constitution. And it has been the Democrats who have been trying to unwrite that.
Yeah.
Since the Civil War. Yeah.
No, they make the same argument now that Calhoun made. They just make it on a different basis.
And the trick, too, is we debate it between small and big government, and that's often where but really the distinction here is limited and unlimited
That's
government.
Right. It's enumerated powers government and government that can do whatever. Joe Biden literally said that we have the power in our hands to cure cancer. He said that in that speech, and everybody's just going to be like, oh, you know what, that's totally fine. Explain to me that. Seriously, I want to know. I want to know who are these evil people standing in the way of us curing cancer. Because if it's adult Joe Biden who's going to cure cancer, why has he been holding back the cure all this time? It seems like that would have been a little bit useful. Is it Dr. Jill? Is it Fauci? Like who? I want to know who in their safe can open up that safe and there's the cure for cancer. If only we just throw a bunch of cash at things, then magically these things get cured. I'll also note that he spent a little bit of time there bashing Big Pharma. He spends the entire beginning of his speech talking about the magic of the vaccines, and we've tranched out these vaccines. Who do you think created the vaccines? Wasn't Joe Biden? Wasn't useless Dr. Fauci? Wasn't the CDC or the FDA? It was Big Pharma.
Big Pharma.
It was Big Pharma.
That's always the tension, because the other problem is you spend the first part of the speech and the last part talking about America, we're a light to the world, we're unified, we're a great country, and then you take that detour in the middle saying that, oh yeah, we're systemically racist, we're oppressing black people. Well, I mean, which is it? I mean, this is a horrible country for minorities to live in. We're killing them in the street just for existing.
But we have to defeat China.
Right, and we're right.
But Joe Biden, we have to admit here that Joe Biden is riding a wave created by Donald Trump to some degree. He's riding a double wave. One is that the vaccine, which was brought into existence by Trump's program, by the Warp Speed, Operation Warp Speed, is basically bringing an end to this pandemic. That's one thing. And this shutdown, this ill-advised and overlong and ridiculous shutdown, is going to come to an end, and the economy is going to boom. And so Biden knows that he's riding that wave.
Right.
He is riding the wave of the end of this pandemic, which is going to create good feelings, as it should, and he's riding the wave of the economy coming back. The question that I have about Biden right now is he waiting for, is he hoping that through this he can get this left-wing agenda? Because let's face it, Biden is not a leftist. He's not anything. He's a weather vane. He goes with where the party goes.
Well, he wants his legacy.
Right now, the party, he wants
his legacy.
He wants his legacy. But right now, the party is a left-wing party. It is a far left party, and it is pushing him along. If he loses in the midterms, if he loses the majority in the House, and even could lose the majority in the Senate, really, is that better for him in some way?
Yes, because he doesn't. Here's the thing: he doesn't care what happens 4 years from now. He's not running for re-election.
Right.
All he wants to be known as is he doesn't want to be the old man who's just the bridge to Kamala. He wants to be the guy who they should put on Mount Rushmore because he had the most consequential single term in American history, and so he's going to ram through as much of this crap as possible. He has the single best issue ever to do it, namely this COVID pandemic. Right. So that's why he's hanging on to this thing with the skin of his teeth. I mean, he is just grabbing onto the COVID pandemic, and he's like, we got to remake the economy. We got to make racial politics in this country. We've got to redo our foreign policy. We got to redo our unionization laws. We got to pass everything. We got to do it right now, because of what you're saying.
Right.
If he waits too long, the economy already will have recovered, and then we're going to be like, we don't need any of this.
That's one of the many reasons why it's insane that we allow a 78-year-old man to be president in the first place, because they're not going to be around for the future, so they've sort of got nothing to lose. I don't know why. This should be...
He's a lame duck.
This should be agreement across the entire country that there should be an age limit for the presidency on the upper end, just like there is on the lower end. 35, you can't run before 35. Why should we allow you after 75 to run? That gives you a 40-year window to become president. You can't do it then. Go home to your family, sit in a rocking chair, talk to your grandchildren. It wasn't meant to be.
I do think they should put him on Mount Rushmore because he's as lively as the other presidents.
I want to push back on some conventional wisdom that you cited. You said, he's going to ride this wave of goodwill that will accompany the end of the pandemic. He's going to ride the economic boom that comes at the end of the pandemic. You had one other thing about the end of the pandemic.
Just the good feeling of people coming back to it.
I actually wonder if any of those things are true.
Okay.
I think they could have been true. And I think in the final analysis, they will not be true. I think that the economy is not going to surge. I think that the economy has to some degree surged already because red states started going back to work 6 months ago. But I think they've printed so much money during this pandemic that what we're actually going to see is this huge wave of economic activity that everybody's kind of been counting on. I think it's not going to happen the way that we thought it would. And the markets, because they've been so wound up waiting for that to happen, are going to suddenly become disillusioned. And markets run on the illusion of momentum. I think that economic surge isn't coming. I think inflation is coming instead. And I don't think there's going to be a wave of euphoric goodwill at the end of the pandemic, because I actually think they've created it since the lockdowns weren't actually, that was your other one, the lockdowns. Yeah. Since the lockdowns weren't actually driven by the science of the pandemic, masks weren't driven by the science of the pandemic, the CDC guidelines weren't driven by the science of the pandemic, nothing therefore has changed scientifically to justify the end of quote unquote. But what I mean is this. People aren't going to take their masks off. People aren't going to acknowledge an end of the pandemic. You're going to have the people who were the most afraid, who wore masks every day, got vaccinated, still wear masks. Yeah. And the people who were not very afraid, made a different risk assessment, probably never wore masks that much, don't get vaccinated, and have been living their lives more or less already. those two camps are just going to remain. I don't think Joe Biden can wave a wand and say, congratulations, America, pandemic done, over. It's gone, done, totally over. They can't put it back together. They can't put it back
I
together.
actually think that what we're actually disagreeing on is timing.
Yeah,
See, I think there's going to be an economic boom. I think there's going to be an end to the pandemic. But the question is, over the long term, the things that Biden is doing are going to cost us dearly,
Yes.
but not for 2 years.
Well, that's the question. Is it going to be 2 years? Or is it going to be a year and a half? Right? That's the gamble. That really is the gamble.
Yeah,
I mean, if things start to crash in the middle of next year, then they lose the First of all, I think they lose the Congress anyway.
Yeah.
I think that they.
Let us hope. Yeah.
I think they're going to lose the House of Representatives. I find it very hard to believe that they're going to retain the House, considering that they did so poorly when Joe Biden won 7 million more popular votes than Donald Trump, and they barely held on to the House.
But there is a question here, which is, do they get through this major election overhaul that gives a distinct advantage?
Well,
to
they can't. I mean, not without Manchin breaking the filibuster, right?
Yeah.
And Sinema
also,
breaking the filibuster, and I don't think either of them are going to do that.
And it may not be constitutional. I mean,
well, that too. I mean, I think it's pretty wildly unconstitutional in the Supreme Court.
What was interesting to me too about the speech, though, is what wasn't in it. There was no mention of free speech. There was no mention of wokeness, of any of the kinds of things, of the critical race theory. There, even though he said we were racist,
he's in favor of it.
Yes, he is in favor of it. And those are things that are really starting to bother them. And the way you can tell they're starting to bother them is the left is starting to say woke is a bad term. Woke is a bad term. Whenever they get caught being who they are, they change the word.
Yeah.
That is we used to be liberal, now we're progressive.
That's what political correctness is, right?
I think Biden knows that his time is limited and it's rushing him for 2 reasons. Not just because of the 4-year thing and him being in obviously declining health and all of that. I think that there's something else going on. The poll numbers for him are not good. They're just not good.
I agree.
He's at 52, 53%. He won at 51%.
And I think that's baloney.
Okay, but even if you think it's true, he's at the exact same percentage that he was in the popular vote. Okay, with the end of the pandemic, with the booming economy, with no major foreign crisis. Yeah. Right? And with the media fawning all over him and treating him as though he's a historic president with 100% positive media coverage. And he's still at 51%, which means that he only has one direction that he can go at this point. Right? And it ain't up. What can he do to make himself more popular at this point? Seriously, he's handed literal cash checks to Americans. He's just sent checks to millions of Americans. He's said to them, here are your vaccines, and you know what? Now he hasn't said go back to life, but he will. There's no place to go for him but down from here. And so he's like, okay, well, time's wasting, right? The clock is ticking, because if I start hitting 45%, 40%, everything's gone.
Let's check in with Republican Senator Tim Scott, who's given the rebuttal.
No matter how we voted. To govern for all Americans, no matter how we voted. You just heard it again. But our nation is starving for more than empty platitudes. Our nation is starving. We need policies and progress for more than empty platitudes. We need policies and progress 3 months that brings us the actions of the president and his party are pulling us. The actions of the president and his party are pulling us. I won't waste your time with finger pointing or partisan bickering. I won't waste your time with finger pointing or partisan bickering. You can get that on TV honest anytime you want. About common sense, I want to have an common ground.
All right.
That's better.
Yeah, sorry, we're having technical difficulties listening to the Tim Scott rebuttal. We'll hope that we're able to check in with him again. If not, and you're interested, you can check that out. I want to take some questions from our dailywire.com subscribers. They make this show possible. If you subscribe, you get to see all the guys do the video versions of their shows. You get to see the new Candace Owens show. You can watch our feature film Run, Hide, Fight and the future feature films that are coming your way. That's dailywire.com/subscribe. Head over there. You can also ask questions up. They're telling me actually that we have the speech, so let's go back to that for a moment.
And let me say this to the single mothers out there who are working their tails off, working hard, trying to make the ends meet, wondering if it's worth it. You can bet it is. God bless your amazing effort on the part of your kids. I was also blessed by a Chick-fil-A operator, John Moniz, and finally with a string of opportunities that are only possible here in America. This past year, I've watched COVID attack every rung of the ladder that helped me up. So many families have lost parents and grandparents too early. So many small businesses have gone under. Becoming a Christian transformed my life, but for months, too many churches were shut down. Most of all, I'm saddened that millions of kids have lost a year of learning when they could not afford to lose a single day. Locking vulnerable kids out of the classroom is locking adults out of their future. Our public schools should have reopened months ago. Other countries did. Private and religious schools did. Science has shown for months that schools are safe. But too often, powerful grown-ups set science aside, and kids like me were left behind. The clearest case I've seen for school choice in our lifetimes, because we know that education is the closest thing to magic in America. Last year, under Republican leadership, we passed 5 bipartisan COVID packages. Congress supported our schools, our hospitals, saved our economy, and funded Operation Warp Speed, delivering vaccines in record time. All 5 bills got 90 votes in the Senate. Common sense found common ground. In February, Republicans told President Biden we wanted to keep working together to finish this fight. But Democrats wanted to go it alone. They spent almost $2 trillion on a partisan bill that the White House bragged was the most liberal bill in American history. Only 1% went to vaccinations, no requirement to reopen schools promptly. COVID brought Congress together 5 times. This administration pushed us apart. Another issue that should unite us is infrastructure. Republicans support everything you think of when you think of infrastructure. Roads, bridges, ports, airports, waterways, high-speed broadband. We're in for all of that. But again, Democrats want a partisan wish list. They won't even build bridges to build bridges. Less than 6% of the president's plan goes to roads.
Senator Tim Scott giving a capable rebuttal to the President of the United States. We're going to take questions from some of our DailyWire.com subscribers. They're the reason that we're here tonight and able to bring this show to you. So we want to hear from them. Question: how dumb does he think we are? Who will pay for all of this? Of course, those of low income will vote for him, and Democrats, they can continue to get things for free, and all of these reductions for staying at a low income. I mean, we all know the answer. Who's going to pay for it? Ben's going to pay for it.
Right. But he's not, because you can't tax billionaires to get trillions of dollars. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. It really doesn't. And the question of how dumb does he think we are? Dumb. Every D-U-M-B with big letters. Yeah.
But as dumb as it is humanly possible to be. I was screaming at the television when he's talking about taxes. Yeah. Because what he is saying is so obviously asinine. When he says that rich people don't pay their fair share in this country, that is just an abject, disgusting lie. It is a lie. The top 10% of income earners in this country pay all net taxes, not some of the net taxes, all of the net taxes, because net taxes are defined as what you pay into the government minus what you get back from the government. So if you get back from the government more than you paid in, this means that you were not a person who paid net taxes into the government. Only the people at the top of the spectrum are paying net taxes in this country. All of the net taxes in this country. Yeah. When he says they're not paying their fair share, the only thing he means by they're not paying their fair share is it should be nearly all of your income goes to the federal government. And when he says things like, I'm not going to tax anybody who's making under $400,000 a year, he is lying to you through his teeth. When he says I'm going to tax corporations, corporations are not human beings for purposes of taxes. The money that would have been passed on to you via income is being taxed up here. That money is now being withdrawn from the system and taken away from you. Corporations are going to have to raise prices in order to deal with the taxation effects. When he says that I'm going to tax all of these rich people on their capital gains taxes, what do you think those rich people are going to do rather than put their money in the stock market where they get taxed on capital gains? They're not going to put their money in the stock market. So what happens to your 401k if you're a union member or a teacher's union member? What do you think happens to all the other 50% of the population who are invested in the stock market right now? And what happens to the businesses that hire you when Joe Biden decides that your boss needs to be taxed out of existence in order so that he can determine where the dollars go? This jackass who's never created a single job in his entire life.
The people who don't pay their fair share in this country are the poor. We need to raise taxes on the poor. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. The poor in this country pay zero. The lower middle class in this country pay net zero. So we have a group of people who pay no taxes, a group of people who pay no net taxes, a group of people who pay all the net taxes. And his argument is that it's category 3 who don't pay their fair share. Fair share means your percentage of taxes. We've determined that there are some people who shouldn't pay any percent of taxes. The only fair taxing system is one in which everyone pays.
But you know what's complicated about this, and it's the bait that Biden wants us to take. is he wants to make this a class issue. Poor people vote for Democrats, rich people vote for Republicans. It's just not true. Millionaires broke for Biden, and very often it's those poor, deplorable Americans who vote for Republicans. And it's just a lie that Biden and all these...
And it's just all double taxation. It's all double taxation. Of course. Every dollar is getting taxed 7 different ways. And if I earn $1, I get taxed as income if I earn $1. Then if I invest it in the stock market, they tax that dollar. Then if God forbid I die and I pass it on to my kids, they tax that dollar. Then if I use it in a transaction, they tax that dollar in sales tax. If I use it to buy a house, they tax it in property tax.
The problem is nobody cares. Like,
of course,
spending is, I think, sort of the Republican climate change. In that it's the issue we talk about, but nobody cares because it's not a reality. Now, the difference is that spending is an actual problem where climate change isn't. But in people's lived experience, which is the phrase that we hear from the left all the time, it's just not a reality to them. They don't feel it. So it's just this doesn't mean anything. And on top of it, we also know that for the last 4 years, there's this sort of glaring dead zone where Republicans stopped talking about this issue completely. And now they're getting back to it. I think it rings hollow.
No, I mean, that's 100% true. I will say that there is a difference that is not even degree anymore. It is now turning into a difference of kind between you spend $4 trillion a year and you spend $10 trillion a year, right? Yes, Republicans did a horrible job restraining themselves on spending, but that's been true for decades. Yep. I mean, seriously, really only in the 90s with Newt Gingrich did they do anything serious about spending. Other than that, Republicans have spent like drunken sailors. Yep. But Joe Biden isn't spending like a drunken sailor. Joe Biden is spending like an entire drunken Navy. I mean, it's insane. I mean, and there will be effects to this. On the taxation side, what people should understand is that it's not just me bitching about paying too much in my taxes, even though I do pay way too much in my taxes. And in fact, one of the main reasons for my leaving a high tax state was because I did not wish to spend large sums of money with the worst government in America, the government of the state of California, right? So that I could have a drug-addicted homeless person standing directly outside my front gate, suffering and threatening my family. Like that seemed like not a great way to spend my tax dollars. But it's what people need to understand is that when he talks about raising taxes, those are the dollars that go to make your job. Okay, this lie that it's when he says the middle class built this country, where did the middle class get its money? Where does he think that came from?
This is why
that is just such crap. I mean, like I was a middle class person for the vast majority of my life. My parents were middle class people for the vast majority of their lives. The middle class is great, but people are in and out of the middle class. It's not a set group of human beings.
Yeah, that's right.
You start off in America as a poor person. Then you move into the middle class as you age. And then by the time you retire, usually you're upper middle class.
Same for minimum wage workers. That's not a set group. You're supposed to be a minimum wage worker for, a couple of years.
We're not living in like
this is why
in a British TV show from 1773, right, where everybody is a part of a class and you just stay there your whole life and you can never escape it. That's not how it works here.
Every time a president or a government worker uses the word investment, I want to explode, because the investment means that you go out to work, you make $1, they take the dollar and say, you know what I'm going to spend this dollar on? I'm going to spend it on what I want to spend it on. Whereas if you go and say, I'm going to buy a Chinese meal, you've actually created another job. You've actually invested your money where you think it should go.
Investment
valuable.
By nature, by definition, entails taking a risk. Okay, when I invest $1, I am taking a risk. I'm putting the dollar in, and then maybe if things go well, I will make more dollars out than the dollar that I put in. When the government invests your money, they don't give two craps whether $1 comes back in the other end. In fact, they know that $1 is not coming in back in the other end.
Right. But investment also involves choice, and who's going to make that choice? Is it going to be you who earned the money, or them? We had that system in the South before the Civil War, where somebody else did the work and the other guy got the money.
That's right.
That's not the way it's supposed to be.
By the way, if the government wanted to invest, it would actually be fairly remarkable. So we pay approximately $2,000 a month to people over 65 in this country for Social Security. It's almost impossible to live a good life on $2,000 a month in this country. But that's what we give them, and we tell them that we're very charitable and we're very caring because we do it. Now, if you live for, let's say, 20 years, and we're paying you $2,000 a month, we're paying you $24,000 a year, we're paying you $240,000 a decade, we're paying you approximately $500,000
every 20 years. Yeah.
Every 20 years, for the 20 years of your retirement. During that period of time, there is no money. It's not your money. They told you it was your money. They said they were going to take your money, put it in a lockbox. They didn't. They spent all your money. Now they're taking the money from younger people.
That's right.
To give to you.
And there are fewer of them, too.
And there are fewer and fewer of them. So they're taking money from people who are working, giving it to people who aren't working to the tune of $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year. You're not doing very well. And the government owns you, lock, stock.
That's right.
Now, if the government wanted to invest, it could, instead of doing that, it could say, instead of paying you $2,000 when you retire, we're going to put $2,000 a month into the market in your name on the day that you're born. And if they did that for 24 months, you would have 3 times more money in retirement, and you could live more than 20 years. You could retire at 65 and live for 40 years.
If they put it in Dogecoin, you'd be a trillionaire.
A trillionaire. The point being, investments bear returns. Right. The government just confiscates money from the people who have it and give it to the people most likely to vote for them. And they call that an investment.
How do you get people to care about this issue, though? That's what I can't.
They're about to care. They're about to care. We haven't cared heretofore because there's been more and more and more money. The problem is now the interest that we actually, the debt isn't free. Right. You have to pay interest on the debt. It's been the case that up until now, the interest on the debt was a serviceable number. But we're getting to a place now where the interest on the debt will require us to pay higher and higher taxes and get nothing else in return for it.
Well, this is where we're about to hit within the next 5 to 10 years where Germany was, right? We're going to start having to take austerity measures. And the Democrats are not going to want to do austerity measures, but they're really not going to have a choice because even Angela Merkel has to do austerity measures, right? Even the Greeks had to do austerity measures. Like, there comes a point where you just don't have any choices left. And then it's basically going to be a fight over how much austerity is too much austerity and how much taxation is too much taxation. But we're going to find ourselves in a world of hurt. And the only way that you're going to be able to get out of that world of hurt is by actively cutting benefits. And if you want actual economic growth, actively cutting taxes. Because otherwise, the only solution is to raise taxes sky high and cut benefits, in which case you get a stagnant economy and crappy social services.
And we're living on the illusion that the American dollar is still the strongest economic vehicle in the world, where ultimately, eventually, that's just not going to be true.
This is why I think the next step that's going to be made is they're going to come after Bitcoin with a vengeance. They're going to wreck Bitcoin. The government cannot allow Bitcoin to exist. They can't. Because more and more people are saying, as you inflate the dollar, I'm just going to take my money and I'll put it in gold or I'll put it in Bitcoin. FDR didn't like when people were investing in gold for a very specific reason, right? They're going to do exactly the same thing with Bitcoin, which basically just is a repository of value that is not inflatable by a centralized government.
So can I talk about the best part of the speech, the part I like the most? It's the part where Joe Biden sold 100,000 AR-15s. I think at the end of that speech, he sold approximately 100,000 AR-15s. By saying that he's going to take away AR-15.
And the Washington Post, by the way, actually called him on the idea that Republicans and gun owners support him in this. They just
of course not.
Of course not. Gun control is becoming less and less popular every day. One of the amazing things that's actually happening in the country and was really escalated during COVID is that not only did we sell more guns in the last year than had ever been sold before, there were more first-time gun owners.
Well, it's impossible to get ammo now, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
But the more people buy guns, the less people support.
Well, they keep saying things like, what if we got rid of all the guns because guns are bad? Also, what if we got rid of all the cops because cops are bad? And you're like, well, that's a bit of a problem.
Also, what if we shut down all the prisons because prisons are bad?
Also, what if we take away all of your investments so you have any money?
This is the one issue. Gun control is maybe the one issue that Republicans and conservatives have held the line on for decades and have actually won. This one issue. It's a very important issue. It's not, to my mind, the most important issue, but it's very, very important. And, I always wonder what lessons can we take from that? Look at what the gun rights lobby has done, and can we do similar things with, like, the life issue and protecting children and those sorts of things?
I don't agree. We've held the line well on the life issue, and it is another issue that we win on. What we haven't done a good job of is actually using government to forward the life issue when we have power.
Great point.
But we have done a great job, I think. There are no pro-choice Republicans in national elected office, are there?
Right.
Now, the fact that we suck at doing anything about it once we're in power, I totally agree. But those are the only two, I would say there are two issues that we've been incredibly ideologically pure on in my life.
It's also different math with regard to legislation, just because on guns, it's easier to obstruct than it is to pass, right?
Yeah.
It's much easier to say, okay, you guys want to pass this stuff, you don't have the votes for it, than to say, okay, we're going to roll back all of this pro-choice nonsense.
Well, but we also, but $500 million a year going to Planned Parenthood.
I agree with you.
Kills 330,000 babies a year, and that continued when Republicans had total control of the government. So
They do not.
Absolutely.
They do. They're talking about Republicans being cowards. They do not want to do it. They're so
Well,
afraid.
even think about it. I mean, Trump stripped something, what was it, 60 million, I think, from Planned Parenthood?
just
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's going to go right back.
Right,
You can't, you can't really do
the
it.
thing is, we talk about following the science is on our side in this. The technology is on our side. You can now see a baby in the, this didn't happen before. When Aquinas was writing about the quickening, he didn't have a sonar machine that he could just say, oh, there's the baby.
Yeah.
It's a baby,
I'll give an example on this. My cute little son, I never got a good sonogram of him because he had his fist right by his face. I actually couldn't. I paid for the extra 3D sonogram. Yeah. I never got it. And you know what? My little son, after he came out of the womb, you know what he always does? He always has his hand by his face because he's the baby. He's the same baby that was in the womb.
What I'll say about the abortion argument, there is something happening in America right now, which I think goes unnoticed. And that's that the states are winning huge victories on the life issue.
Yeah.
Our argument about Roe v. Wade has always been that it was an issue better decided by the states. Yep. And we're right. The federal government can't make the right decision about it. States, Texas, Tennessee, are making great decisions on the life issue, consequential decisions. It's much harder to get an abortion in the reddest of red states than it has been at any point in the lifetime of anyone except Trump.
We just had a new bill passed 2 days ago in Idaho, another heartbeat bill.
Yeah, that's right.
What you're seeing also with Joe Biden accelerating it, I mean, this is real accelerationism, what he is doing right now. And what it's going to result in is the amount of movement by conservatives into red states is just going to be overwhelming. People are just
It's already pretty amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you that in Florida, the real estate market is just extraordinary right now.
Oh,
like people are buying houses sight unseen.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I got to get out of here and I got to get someplace sane.
Yeah.
There are people at this company who bought houses sight unseen in Tennessee, actually.
I'm looking forward, as an Angelino leaving Los Angeles, I'm looking forward to bringing homelessness and ugly billboards to the rest of the country.
You're going to do great. You're going to do great. So I'm going to take a few more questions from DailyWire.com subscribers. They are the people keeping the show on the air. Go over to DailyWire.com/subscribe and get your question in for the group. Biden refers to China as our direct competition, but do you think he will stand up against them if China follows through and becomes aggressive toward Taiwan? Michael.
How much money did Hunter Biden have on the line there with that private equity deal that didn't? I guess it didn't go through. No, of course not. The thing that we have learned over the last couple of years, I think, in the conservative movement is that there is the blob, the liberal establishment, which there's an uncomfortable overlap between the government and the administrative state and big tech and big corporations, those big woke corporations in Georgia. And where are they getting a lot of their money from? Just ask LeBron James. Just ask the NBA.
That's right.
They get it from China. So is Joe Biden, who not that long ago was cheering on the rise of China, saying this is a wonderful thing, a rising China is great for everybody. Let him into the WTO. Of course not. He's the last guy that's going to stand up.
Well, I don't think China is going to make a full-on militarily aggressive move against Taiwan, because I don't think they need to. I think what they're going to do is they're going to start a low-level pressure campaign against Taiwan, see if they can get a government elected in Taiwan that is much more pro-China, and then just start using authoritarian measures, because this is exactly what they did in Hong Kong, and the rest of the world just shrugged. I mean, it is an amazing thing that we have watched in our lifetime, the first reversal of a free state into absolute tyranny through a foreign country's influence. It's the first thing this is the first time this has happened basically since the end of the Cold War.
Right.
Yeah. And the rest, and everybody just shrugged. They went, okay, so they just subjected 7 million people in Hong Kong to absolute tyranny and no one cared.
You know, we have a serious problem with China. First of all, I want to say that if I were China, I'd go into Taiwan tomorrow. I'd take it over tomorrow. Yeah. I'd do it militarily. And I mean, what is Biden going to do at this point? He has not got the wherewithal.
It proves America to be neutered if they do it.
What's that?
They both get Taiwan and they get to show that America
That's right.
And the American people don't want to go send the military into
No, it wouldn't turn into a military
the
conflict. They'd be able to take it, but there would be some pretty significant economic consequences for them, so why not do it the easy way?
The left's problem with China is the left is China. They actually believe in a free market, but in chained people. And China has shown so far, I don't actually believe that's going to work in the long run, but they have shown so far that they can make that work.
Well,
our belief is
China is just sans Holocaust, and if you include what's going on in Xinjiang, even including Holocaust, they're just Nazi Germany.
Yeah,
that's all they are. I mean, they have a Nazi economy,
right.
which they top-down corporatist economy, in which they have a few approved companies, and the government of China says you're allowed to make a lot of money here, and you're allowed to make a lot of money here. It's basically mercantilism, and you're going to, and will allow you.
I don't agree that that's a free market.
That's not a free market. It's mercantilist corporatism.
But that's essentially what the Democrats are for. I mean, they believe in controlling. They believe in controlling the people through the corporations and controlling the corporations through the government.
Right.
That is China. So why should they fight them?
How can we count on Republicans, asks one DailyWire.com subscriber, to actually fight back against these policies that Biden is implementing?
Well, we can't. I mean, that's and we didn't see the whole Tim Scott speech, but what we needed to see, and maybe he did it, I'm skeptical, is a fiery defense of law and order, a defense of free speech. This is what people care about. They need to get fired up. Getting on board with police reform in any capacity at all. We shouldn't even be entertaining the idea. There's no reason for it because this crisis of police brutality is manufactured by the left. But I don't have any confidence in the Republican Party at all, especially because, as we talked about before we went there, these Republicans came to the speech and wore their masks, including some Republicans who previously had great moments where they said, I'm not going to wear the mask because I don't need to. And there they are sitting.
Well, we just said that there's this model here where the liberal establishment is going to use the corporations to control the people. Money talks and BS walks. And just a few hours ago, there was an excellent op-ed published in the Wall Street Journal by our pal, Ted Cruz. Cruz came out and he said, look, Republicans were wrong to shill for corporations before. We were all part of it. We're not going to do it anymore. We're not going to let them do. I'm not going to take a penny from corporate PACs. More than that, I call on all of my fellow Republicans not to take a penny from corporate PACs. Is that going to solve the problem? I don't think it's going to solve the problem. Is it a step in the right direction? Absolutely, especially if it pressures Republicans to break this hold. Because how many big tech hearings did we see where those senators, they sat there and they yelled at Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah. They yelled at all these guys. And then what followed from that? Absolutely nothing. Because big tech was donating to their campaigns.
Yeah.
I think it's not just that big tech donates to their campaigns. I think that it's also what we've been talking about all night. It's a fundamental kind of cowardice among Republicans to take action. Yeah. One of the things that's happened is that Congress generally has ceded all of its constitutional authorities to the executive and the bureaucracy. They don't want to do anything because you can't really be judged.
That's right.
On nothing.
That's right.
You only are going to lose. Their theory goes, if we do something, there will be people who don't like it, and then we'll lose.
Well, it's also true that there are a lot of conservatives who think that conservatism is really more attitudinal than programmatic, meaning it's more of the attitude that you take about stopping change as opposed to a program for actually implementing change. Well, if it's just about the attitude and what you're conserving is a system that is largely moved to the left, you're not actively being conservative. And you see this over and over from members of government, which is, well, we did thwart their plans, right? Our job is to be there and it's to stand to thwart the rails of history shouting stop. Well, what happened if the train already pushed you several hundred yards in this direction? It doesn't matter. If you're like, this train needs to be put on a completely different track.
They don't understand. They act like European conservatives. And they don't understand that American conservatives are liberal. American conservatives are conserving the Constitution, the most liberal document in the old style meaning of liberal, the most liberal document ever invented because it leaves people free. Liberalism is freedom, and it leaves people free. We are defending something, a philosophy, an active philosophy, as opposed to Europeans defending blood and soil and rank and all the things that conservatives in Europe defended. We don't defend any of that. We defend the Constitution. We are defending a revolutionary idea, the only revolutionary political idea that's existed for 200 years.
I mean, it's kind of incredible. So I spoke to the House Republican caucus a little bit earlier this week, as reported in a few of the kind of political outlets. And one of the things that I was talking about was the contract with America. I said, you guys ought to have a second contract with America. And so I went back, I looked at the original contract with America. And what I noticed is that the original contract with America, which promised that the Republicans would pass about 10 different bills and 8 different reforms, they did pass all of those things, and many of them were vetoed by Bill Clinton. But a lot of those things are still not done. Right, things like zero baseline budgeting, right? That's an easy one, right? There are certain things that they were like police reform was being proposed, like not police reform, additional police funding was being proposed by the Republicans in '93, so that they would win back to Congress in '94 because there were serious problems with crime at that point. Even Joe Biden thought there were serious problems with crime at that point, back when he had not completely lost his mind. Yeah. And
is that back when Kamala was marching at Selma?
I think so. She was in the stroller, yeah.
And the fact is that the Republicans have held Congress several times since then with a Republican president and with a Republican Senate, and they didn't make that stuff permanent. They only passed it when Democrats were in control.
We should be fair, though. We did have a Republican leader read Green Eggs and Ham. And, that was an important moment for all of us.
Yeah. We less than 4 years ago Republicans controlled the Congress and the presidency, and they did nothing.
And you know, there is a way.
Oh, they passed a tax cut.
They passed a tax cut.
A temporary.
They changed music copyright law. That was big.
There
That's
is
actually
a way.
a good thing.
No, it was a good thing.
But it wasn't
like
substantial.
on my list of priorities. It wasn't like
You know, there are a lot of conservatives right now who hear when we talk about the Constitution and these abstract philosophical ideas who say, I don't care about things that are floating in the sky. I want tangible results. And I think there is a way to bring these things together, which is the American way of life. There is an American way of life where all these great philosophical ideas have actually been embodied in real institutions and real rights that we've all cherished for a very long time that the left is trying to destroy. And I just think if Republicans would get down to brass tacks and say, you know, the stuff that's going on in our streets, it's just wrong. We don't like it. It's not part of our political tradition, which comes from our ideas and the way it's been enacted. Get back to that. Get back to that America that we cherish and love. Trump did a very good job of putting it in really practical terms, and I just fear sometimes Republicans were too pie in the sky about it. Just give people something to hold on to in this country.
You know, it is funny. Trump did do a good job of telling stories. He was really good at that, and it was something that Republicans and conservatives in general need to learn. But, you know, all the time Trump was in office, I would complain about his personality and his rudeness and his unkindness. And I think like that really was the turning point in the sense that, for instance, John McCain destroyed the end of Obamacare because he was ticked off.
Yeah.
You know, he had been mistreated, and you know, these guys are all narcissists and they don't want to be mistreated. Yeah. We are left with, and I think you, Matt, tweeted this out yesterday or today, that we're left with a Republican administration that left us nothing of enduring value. And unfortunately, that happens just too often because of what you're saying, Ben, that they don't have a positive vision of what it means to be a conservative. And I think you're right, too. I think that the idea, we are talking about things that maybe are a little too pie in the sky. We have to show people how they work. It's a harder story to tell. It's a harder story to tell that each individual person making decisions on his own, each individual person trying to better his life, actually betters the country more than Joe Biden's idea that he's just going to pour money.
Well, what's kind of fascinating is that Democrats do one thing that I've never really heard a Republican do. Democrats do something that is very useful in nearly every state that has popular support, and that is they ask for sacrifice. Right? They do this all the time. They say you're going to have to sacrifice this for climate change. You're going to have to sacrifice this for racial inequity. You're going to have to sacrifice this for income inequality. And the truth is that Republicans never do that. They sort of suggest, okay, well, you can have your cake and you can eat it too, which is how you end up with tax cuts and high spending, right?
Yeah.
At no point do they ever say, you know what, for the sake of the country and for the sake of your children, we're going to have to cut spending, and it's going to come from places that you're upset about, right? It's going to come from places where you may be upset at me that I'm cutting this, but for the sake of your kids, you are going to have to just take the hit. You're going to have to be an adult. And so what they've done is they've trained an entire generation of Republican voters to vote for Republicans, but then when it comes time to pass a piece of legislation that requires some sacrifice here or there, the Republican voter goes, well, I do want to cut spending, but I really don't want to cut that.
Yeah, but the difference is, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that needs to be the message from the Republican Party, absolutely. But the one advantage that the Democrats have is they ask for sacrifice, but it's someone else who's making the sacrifice. So you as the voter are not sacrificing. So on climate change, on taxes, everything, it's the bad guys, it's the evil.
I'm actually not sure, Matt. I think that...
But they like the sacrifice.
I think that people like the idea.
The masking.
The mask is a sacrifice. And this is Orwell on Hitler, right? Orwell very famously, during the war, early in the war, 41 maybe?
41.
Writes...
40
writes an introduction to Mein Kampf. And it's one of the most fascinating reads. If you've never read, it's very short, 2 or 3 pages. It's fascinating because he predicts the end of the pact between Germany and Russia vis-a-vis Poland. He basically tells the future. And so you read it now and it feels like, well, yeah, we all know that that's what happens. At the time, no one knew that's what was going to happen except Orwell, right? And he's saying exactly what's going to happen. And at the conclusion, he says, very close to what you're saying, Ben, he essentially says that, you know, the liberal West offers its people the promise of a life of security and ease.
Yeah.
And the power of Hitler is that he stands before his people against the backdrop of Western ease and promises them only honor and valor
and toil and sacrifice.
And so does Churchill. Churchill did the exact same thing: blood, sweat, and tears.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
But blood, sweat, and tears.
Which is why people see him as an inspirational leader.
That's right.
The lie of modern liberalism is that what people actually want from their leaders is stuff. right? That if you give them a prosperous state, then they'll be super happy. And it's just a lie. We have the most prosperous America that we've ever had. We had it before the pandemic, and we'll have it again after the pandemic. And yet people are deeply unhappy because normally the things that they would be called to sacrifice for, like their religion, even their religions are not calling for them to sacrifice anymore.
That's right.
Their religions aren't even calling for them to sacrifice their own personal desires on behalf of them.
Is it less sacrifice? There's an element of sacrifice, but I think the main thing with Democrats and the left, especially somebody like Bernie Sanders, he's making a moral argument.
Yes.
So that's what he's talking about.
Right.
He's saying this is the right thing to do, and that's why we need to do it. Whether there's sacrifice or not, it's just the right thing. It might not be the most practical thing, but it's the right thing. And that's the argument that the Republican Party doesn't make. They've sacrificed the moral argument.
There is a liturgical element to this in that you remember a few years ago, and I guess more than a few years now, under Obama said, look, we'll solve this terrorism thing once we get some more jobs in Pakistan. Then it's all good, and more jobs in Afghanistan. Then they'll all be happy because they'll have iPhones. And you had this strange phenomenon of third-generation foreigners, third-generation immigrants in the United Kingdom, flying to the Middle East to join ISIS. Why are you leaving London to join ISIS? Because of exactly what Orwell said.
That's right.
Because that is a life imbued with meaning and sacrifice and an enactment of these values.
But you guys are leaving one thing out. You're leaving one thing out. In order to call for sacrifice, you have to have a crisis. And the left manufactures crises again and again and again, and we never do. What we always say is the only crisis is the left. But we do have a crisis in this country. We have a crisis of spirit. We have a crisis of vision. We have a crisis of freedom, most importantly of all. And we have to push that forward and make people understand that those things are things you sacrifice for. I'm not sacrificing to turn off the sun. I'm sorry. The sun is going to be there, and if it's not there, it's just going to be a very, very cold night. You know, I mean,
watch out for itself.
but I will sacrifice. You know, we were talking about Nick Fuentes today, a guy all of us despise, and we despise the things he believes in. I personally am offended by what Nick Fuentes says, but he got on a plane and they wouldn't let him fly. And I want to defend his rights, not because I defend him, but because his rights are my rights. Of course. And they're your rights, and we want to preserve those rights. We've got to make people understand.
And for our children, too. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but that's a real crisis. We're murdering our children. They're being corrupted and perverted in schools. We're literally trying to turn boys into girls, drugging and mutilating them. That's a real crisis that I think most people are willing to sacrifice for their children, and that's a message that somehow the Republican Party doesn't make.
One of the most essentially left-wing moments of these last few weeks was the New York Times saying that we mustn't talk about the fact that these children who have been out of school are never going to catch up because that stigmatizes them. So in other words, our lousy programs, our lousy ideas, the terrible things that we did are not going to be addressed because, that would stigmatize the children. You know, of course we have to defend our children. The left has sold them to the teachers union.
Can I make an unpopular
No, damn it. We want you to be popular every damn minute.
More unpopular than tax the poor.
Taxing the poor is moral, and we should do it. The only thing immoral.
I'm just going to keep double down on this one.
Can we also beat up the poor?
No.
Stop that. God.
We preach in this country the virtue of not working.
Yeah.
You have books, the 40-hour work week. You know, everyone wants early retirement. How could I retire by 35? Retire by 40? How could I retire by 50? We are meant in a fallen world to toil.
Bingo.
The Bible doesn't say take one day of your 2-day weekend and don't work. The Bible says 6 days you will toil. It's a biblical both prescription and description, to borrow from Ben, that you would work 6 days of your life and rest on the seventh day. We can talk about the theological ramifications of that. That's a great conversation, but I'm talking in a very practical sense. God commands and describes man as one who will work 6 out of 7
By the sweat
days.
of your brow.
By the sweat of your brow. And we say you shouldn't. I see all these women in America today who are miserably unhappy. And they're miserably unhappy, Christian women, because they believe that it's wrong for a woman to work outside the house. They believe they're supposed to be homemakers. And listen, if you've got young children at home, I think it's very beautiful for you not to work and to raise those young children. That is a kind of toil. Yeah. That is a kind of labor.
Yeah.
But a lot of these women in America, they have 1 kid or 2 kids. They leave the workforce. They raise them until they're 6. Then they send them to public school. And then they call themselves stay-at-home housewives or stay-at-home homemakers. But the problem is we've replaced that job. The 20th century replaced the job of the homemaker. We We have washing machines. We have dishwashers. We have vacuums. All the things that caused a homemaker to toil were replaced, and women in that position became less and less happy. And they believe that the Bible tells them, many of these Christian women, that they're supposed to stay home and watch daytime TV instead of having a job, and that isn't true.
That is toil.
That is true toil.
But you're not supposed to stay home and watch daytime TV. That is a miserable life, and it makes you miserable. You're supposed to stay home and toil. Raising kids, yes. Homeschooling kids, of course. I'm not saying that everybody has to have a job outside the house, but you have to have a job. You have to have a thing that you do with your hands that creates value.
Listen, I have to say, in my new book, which comes out in April, The Truth and Beauty, I write an entire chapter about
Wait, what's the title?
The Truth and Beauty.
It's called Another Good Thing.
Can I please write your titles? For the love of God, Drew. Can you please? So it's like the third straight title where I'm...
I think that's a great title.
Thank you very much. So, but you're absolutely right about this, that every job, when you look at what is the Proverbs 31 woman that they talk about, she does everything. She's making clothes, she's buying property, she toils. But all of those things were taken out.
That every Friday night in the Jewish community.
They were destroyed by the Industrial Revolution. They absolutely were.
Right.
Children were taken out of the home. All these things that made a woman's work less valuable. To me, the great prospect is, because I think the toil of making a home for people is a huge humanizing task. I think homemakers are the most important people in America. I think that's the central job that all other jobs, as C.S. Lewis said, were built to support. And what I think the answer to this is that there will be there are new versions of work that can be done in the home. I don't think women should leave the home. I think homemaking is the humanizing job of women that we discount so much.
But let me just say, for the record, in Media Matters, that women should definitely do whatever they want with their work.
No, they need to.
But we're not saying that for Media Matters.
I know.
Screw Media Matters, but I mean, of course, everybody has his or her own choice about what they're going to do. I'm simply saying that this should be a dignified, celebrated choice.
We should distinguish between, and this is where a lot of the confusion comes in, distinguish, but like a job and work are two, not necessarily the same thing. You can work at your job, but there's a lot of work to be done at home. Recently there was some left-wingers that were tweeting about how, they don't respect stay-at-home moms because there's they want people who have ambition, and it takes a lot of ambition to work at home and to build a home. Yeah. Now, you can be an unambitious parent and your kids are going to be miserable and your spouse is going to be miserable. It's going to be a terrible home. But there's a difference between ambitious parenting
and by the way, forcing women out of the home is an actual structured strategy of the left. Yeah. There's a great story that I recount in my upcoming book, Speechless Control. It's available June 22nd, now for pre-order.
This title is better than yours.
Oh, yes. This is like the first compliment.
I know, but the bar was so low.
So there was this great moment between Simone de Beauvoir, very famous feminist theorist. She was the jilted common law wife of Jean-Paul Sartre, the notorious philanderer, and Betty Friedan, who was the American feminist. And Betty Friedan said, women, if they want to go out and work at the widget factory, they should be allowed to do it. And Simone de Beauvoir said, no, you're getting it wrong. Women must leave the home. They should not be given the choice to stay at home and raise the family, because if they are given that choice, they will take it.
Right.
Too many of them will take it, and that will not live.
Hang on. I appreciate what you guys are saying, but I'm saying something else. I'm saying that women should not stay home and not work. I'm saying that men should not retire at age 30.
Yes.
I'm saying that we should not promise people lives of leisure.
Yes.
I'm saying that we shouldn't burden Christian women with the idea that being home alone with nothing to do makes you virtuous.
100%.
I'm saying that God expects everyone, male and female, to work.
Yeah.
I'm saying that 65, you shouldn't be promised not to have to do anything anymore except sit on the boat because you earned it. You didn't earn it. You earned it back when people died at 66.
Yeah.
People now die at 95, and you should work.
Yeah.
You should work. Because
it's better for you.
It is better for you, and it is better for society. It all goes back to this idea that we are not offering anyone any piece of dignity. We're not offering anyone any path to creating to creating with their hands. We're not offering them any path.
That's because we've changed the definition of dignity, though. Because it used to be that dignity was earned. Right, it wasn't something that you were just handed. Dignity. It wasn't. There was no idea that you had the sort of right to dignity right? What you had was the right to go out and no, of course it's silly because that's literally a right to somebody else's sentiment. Dignity is something somebody else gives you, right?
Right.
The idea changed. It was that dignity was something that is to be found in your own sense of authenticity, right? Because you're authentic, therefore you deserve dignity. And that's not correct. It's because of what you do in your life. It's because of the actions that you take in the world and in relationship with your society that you are provided with dignity. Now, that doesn't mean that people can treat you like garbage, but it's an abuse of the word dignity to treat the word dignity the way that we have. The word dignity never meant treat somebody decently. Decently is not the same as dignity. Yeah. Right? Dignity has an element of honor to it. Everybody should be treated decently, of course.
I'm saying that if you expect nothing from anyone, they will be miserable.
Do you remember what Nancy Pelosi said when she was selling Obamacare? She said, this is a wonderful, it's an entrepreneurial bill because now you don't have to work.
It frees you from labor.
You can be a poet. You can be a musician. And you know the thing about poets is, there aren't that many of them, and most of them are not very good.
Well, I also noticed, that of all the vast numbers, millions of Americans on welfare programs and food stamps and disability, I noticed how many just unbelievable poets, painters, and string quartet members there are in this. Like, that's how people spend their time. Yeah. That's not a rip on people's skill sets, by the way. That's just a recognition that when you pay people lots of work, they don't spend the time doing wonderfully productive things. Okay, like Shakespeare spent a pandemic writing Lear, supposedly. Okay, but that's because Shakespeare was Shakespeare. It wasn't like if they paid him not to write Lear. If they'd incentivized Shakespeare, they're like, you know what, dude? Same stipend, don't write Lear.
It's another
he probably doesn't write Lear because that's the way things work.
It's another great Bill Whittle observation that this idea that if the people had the means of production, they'd only have to work 2 hours a day and they could devote the rest of their time to learning art and learning music. And Bill says the internet disproves that because we now in our pocket carry around all human knowledge and wisdom available at our fingertips for free. At any moment, you could be learning a language, you could be reading Lear, and instead we look at pornography and we play Candy Crush. Yeah. That's all we do all day long.
Isn't there, I mean, there's potentially I agree with what everyone is saying, but also I maybe have a problem with the idea that you could just go outside of the house and get a job somewhere and you're going to find dignity in that, because the way that the job market is set up and the way that a lot of companies operate, it can be a very dehumanizing experience. Now does it make it better to sit at home and do nothing? No, but the problem is that...
Well, I mean, charity work was always the thing that many people did. They get involved in their religious community, right? Yeah. As communities die, that takes away a lot of work that people typically did outside the home. Like when people would retire, this was, for most Americans, I would say, when most people retired at age 65, if they were church involved, it'd be like they would go and get involved in their church.
They got more involved in church.
Exactly. They spent that extra time going and doing charity work.
I mean, I lived for many years in Montecito, one of the richest communities in the world. And living in a very wealthy community is really interesting because people do what they want to do, right? They have free choice. And so you see what people want to do. The women stayed home. But they also manufactured the community. They went to the schools. They made sure the schools ran on time. They ran the charities. They did all, they called them Montecito moms. Talk about dignity. When Montecito moms walked down the street, everybody stood still because everybody respected them because they ran the community. They gave us the community in which we worked and for which we worked. And I think that those are things, of course, you don't have to get a paycheck for those, for them to be work. But they also speak to...
In a weird way, this gets us back to Biden, because what Biden is creating is a culture of expectation.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It's a culture where...
And Republicans are accepting the premise.
They always accept the premise.
Yeah, of course. Yep. They're saying, you're right, you do deserve all these things. We just want to give them to you in a more effective way. Yeah. Effectiveness is never a good argument. It's not... Efficiency and effectiveness are not good arguments.
That's right.
A good argument here would be, there should be no culture of expectation. Nothing. You do not deserve to expect anything from us, and society can expect that you are going to be a productive citizen in order for you to actually earn things. Like the culture that we've created, this culture of expectation, is what's created Occupy Wall Street. It's what's created BLM in the streets. It's what's created so many of the things that are destroying the country right now. Is this expectation that you like. I've stopped using the term soft bigotry of low expectations. I now use the term bigotry of no expectations, because that's where we are right now. I mean, when we are now living in a society where every single time there is a police shooting, we full on expect that there will be riots. We full on expect it. That is not a culture that expects any sort of good behavior. That's a culture that expects bad behavior and treats it as virtuous.
You made a point many years ago that somebody who actually liked you did a satire of it that was very funny, where you said that that to say that health care is a right is to say that you have the right to other people's labor, which is just not true. And you were right. You were absolutely right. The joke they made about you was a friendly joke, but it was very funny of you saying, you have no right to other people's labor. But you don't have a right to other people's labor. You have a right to be left alone. You have a right to say what you want to say. You have a right to think what you want to think, and you have a right to make your own choices. But you don't have a right to other people's labor, including the labor of healthcare workers.
No one owes you anything.
Anything. Yeah.
No one owes you anything.
You owe me a couple of bucks.
That's. I got a cigar bill. No one owes you anything. This is the fundamental problem. I mean, the fundamental problem, obviously, is that we reject God.
Well, yes.
But in a very practical sense, the fundamental problem with our society today is that everyone believes that they're owed something by someone.
What you're describing is an emanation of your first point.
Yes. But and it's true in every area of life. If you want to talk about why marriages are dying, it's because you believe that you have a right to expect things from your spouse, and expectations kill marriages.
Well,
absolutely do.
In a family, though, I would say that's the one place where you are owed something. Your children are owed.
Yeah.
This
actually should be the pro-life message. In fact, that you as a parent, you have a responsibility to your child. You owe them something. You brought them into this world, and you have to take care of them.
Now, children are the only people who have a right to expect something.
Right. Exactly.
That's the only thing.
Well, I want to take issue with this a little bit. I mean, I think that individuals, especially in relationships like marriage, they do have a right to expectations of one another.
You've entered a covenant.
Yeah, that's right. You've entered an agreement. And so
fidelity, integrity,
And so I think that's the very difference we're talking about. Individuals owe each other things. Individuals entered agreements. The society owes you nothing. Right. The world owes you nothing.
Although I will say that that when it comes to marriage, I think one of the big things that does plague marriage is people having expectations without having expectations of themselves. Yeah. So when I say that you have the idea of a covenant in marriage is the idea that now the trade is over and not ongoing.
Yeah, right.
Like, oh, well, we signed a contract, so I guess that's the end of the deal. No. The earnings continue, right? You have to work in order to receive from your partner. And if you actually want to have a happy marriage, and you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, but under the contract it says you owe me X, Y, and Z, that's going to be a miserable.
Well, it's like in a job, you say, okay, I've signed my employment contract, great. Now I'm getting my paycheck.
Right.
Cool.
That's one of the most popular stupid memes and slogans you see out there is something like, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. That's I think attributed to Marilyn Monroe incorrectly, but. That's the attitude people bring into romantic relationships is that you have to sort of deserve me to you have to
deal with my bull crap in order to get me at my best. And it's like, well, or you could just not do that,
or just be a good person and also be forgiving of my faults.
I always say, if you want to be my lover, you got to get my friend. I've never actually understood what that's the words. What does that mean? I'm done, and we're done. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We'll see you the next time we do one of these things. Become a member over at dailywire.com/subscribe. Check out the guys. Be able to ask questions the next time we do a Backstage. We're really appreciative to everyone who's done that tonight, and we'll see you next time. Daily Wire Backstage is produced by Mathis Glover. Executive producer is me, Jeremy Boring. Our technical director is Austin Stevens. Our production manager is Pavel Wadowski. Studio and equipment management is by Patrick Kennedy. And broadcast engineering is by Mark Herman. Editing is by Jim Nickel. Audio is mixed by Mike Coromina. And our audio assistant is Israel McFarland. Playback is operated by McKenna Waters. Hair and makeup by Nika Geneva. Daily Wire Backstage is a Daily Wire production. Copyright Daily Wire 2021. Well, hey there. Now's the time when you hit that like button for me so we can keep smoking cigars and drinking whiskey for your amusement. Or, in Ben's case, eating popcorn directly off the floor. He's weird.